Mastering the Lightning of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151 Janus Side Ward. After Augusta came out after preparing dinner, he saw the two getting along so well, and smiled with relief, and quickly invited them to come over for dinner. After dinner, Anduin played with little Neville for a while, and when Neville was tired, he personally carried Neville to bed before returning to his room. In the following days, Anduin lived peacefully, helping Augusta with work every day and playing with little Neville for a while, and his life was quite comfortable. However, after a few days, Augusta came to him. "Tomorrow I'm going to see Frank and Alice. You can go with me, you haven't seen them for a long time." Augusta said. "Yeah." Since Anduin moved in, he had always wanted to suggest to Augusta that he visit the two, but he was a little entangled considering her feelings. Now that Augusta brought it up first, Anduin naturally agreed immediately. Then Anduin seemed to remember something and said, "What about Neville? Should we take him with us?" All this, Augusta knew what Anduin meant and explained, "My nephew Andrew will come tomorrow. He is Frank's cousin and Neville's uncle. He will take care of Neville for us. It's too early for Neville to know about this now." Seeing that Augusta had already made arrangements, Anduin nodded with relief. The next day, after Augusta and Anduin packed their luggage, they came to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. The Longbottoms were arranged in the Janus Sicky ward on the 5th floor of the hospital. It is said that such a strange name was given to commemorate Janus Sicky, who pretended to be eaten by Voldemort in 1973 and faked his own death. Only patients with permanent brain damage will be placed here. This ward is a closed ward, and the door is usually locked. Today is no exception. Augusta found the therapist Malum Straw in charge of this ward and asked her to open the door for the two of them. Frank and Alice have been very stable lately, and they are very well behaved. Therapist Straw said as he opened the door. "Well behaved?" Anduin looked at the kind-faced therapist and thought her choice of words was very special. It was not until he saw the two that Anduin understood why the therapist described them as well behaved. Frank and Alice looked very different from before. There were a few strands of white hair on their heads, and their eyes were dull, without the spirit they used to have. "Candy, I want candy." Frank saw someone coming in and quickly stretched out his hand to ask for it. "Okay, good boy, I'll treat you to some sizzling bee candy today." Therapist Straw skillfully took out a few candies from his jacket pocket and coaxed Frank. Alice, who was standing next to him, turned her head to look at everyone and then turned her head to look out the window, counting the pedestrians coming and going. After the therapist coaxed him like a child, Frank finally calmed down, and then nodded to Augusta and Anduin, turned around and left the ward. Augusta glanced at Anduin, nodded at him, then walked over to Frank and said a few words to him. Then, she told him to eat less sugar like she would to a child, and checked their daily necessities, bed sheets, clothes, etc. Although the hospital nurses took good care of them, as a mother, she still checked them over and over again out of habit. Anduin also came to the two of them and talked to them for a few words, but neither Frank nor Alice responded. One was like a child who only knew to ask for sugar, and the other stared blankly out the window. "Mrs. Longbottom, I want to ask for your consent for something." Anduin hesitated and said to Augusta. "Why are you being so polite to me? Just tell me what you have to say." Augusta responded while combing Alice's hair. "I want to check their memories. I know it may be difficult, but I still want to try to cure them." "Ah." Augusta sighed. "I know you mean well, but when they first got into trouble, Dumbledore personally checked them, and even he couldn't do anything. I don't think you should waste your time. I know my abilities are limited now, but I'm still young. Just because I can't do something now doesn't mean I can't do it in the future, and," Anduin paused, "I promised Neville that I would bring his parents back for him." Seeing Anduin's insistence, Augusta fell into deep thought, and nodded after a while. Maybe this young man would have a way, and she might have a glimmer of hope in her heart. With Augusta's permission, Anduin nodded, walked to Frank and said, "Frank, I'm Anduin, I might offend you a little bit next." Then Anduin held up Frank's slightly confused face and launched the legitimate thoughts. He was very careful when using this magic. His thoughts did not rush violently in his mind, but slowly went deeper, exploring Frank's mind. But in his unique magic perspective, all memory fragments would become one or a series of memory bubbles, and the fragmented memories would float like fragments, while Frank's mind was like a fragmented ruin. Occasionally, some fragmented memory fragments would appear in his vision, but they could not unfold the complete memory fragments. Since Anduin used legislatives, his expression became more and more solemn. The fundamental reason was that Frank's mind was too strange. It's not that Frank's memory was too fragmented or chaotic. If it was just like that, as long as you were willing to spend time, you could still piece it together bit by bit. The strangest thing about Frank's mind was that there were too few memories. The normal person's mind space is like a village, which is high or low, and there must be more or less houses. Even if the village is destroyed, there must be some ruins on it. But in Frank's mind space, although you can occasionally see some ruin-like memory fragments, compared with ordinary people, it is too rare. It seems that the problem is deeper. Anduin thought. Then Anduin controlled his magic vision to explore deeper into Frank's mind space. As he went deeper, the frequency of memory fragments finally increased. In this mind space where there was no way to distinguish the direction, Anduin saw the memory fragments like seeing a lighthouse. In the constant exploration, he gradually moved towards the direction with more memory fragments. Finally, after a long period of exploration, Anduin found the problem, but the scene that appeared in his magic vision was too shocking. Chapter 152 Solution. In his vision, there was a huge mountain with an exaggerated shape. A mountain formed by the compression, accumulation and gathering of memory bubbles and fragments. Anduin looked at the towering memory mountain in the magic vision. He was sure that almost all the memories in Frank's mind space were piled up here, whether in the past or in the present. How could this be? Anduin thought in confusion, and then concentrated on observing this special scene, trying to find some clues from it. Then he found some special places. It seemed that there was something hidden in this memory mountain. If you observe quietly, you can see a faint green light flashing between the memory bubbles. After thinking for a while, he decided to give it a try, so he carefully stretched out his mind tentacles and gently touched the mountain. But at this time, something changed suddenly. Frank's confused expression suddenly became ferocious, and he began to struggle constantly. Discovering Frank's change, Anduin quickly retracted his mind tentacles and entered the legend of the soul. What's wrong? Augusta, who also noticed Frank's change, hurried over to check on Frank's condition, but since Anduin retracted his thought tentacles, Frank has returned to that confused state. After a careful inspection, Augusta did not notice anything unusual about Frank, but she also saw the strange changes in her son just now, and now she looked at Anduin with a questioning look. Because Anduin was afraid of causing secondary damage to Frank, his thinking exploration was very slow, and all his movements were cautious. At this time, he was also tired and sweating. After taking a light breath, he said to Augusta, who was looking at him, "Frank's situation is a little special." "Oh, you found the cause of the problem?" Augusta asked hurriedly after hearing Anduin's words. "It seems to have been found, but not completely." Anduin himself was also very entangled and said carefully, "What does this mean?" Augusta frowned, obviously not understanding Anduin's words. Anduin thought for a while under Augusta's gaze and answered, "Their memories may be affected by the Cruciatus curse. They are almost all shrunk into a ball and stuck together in a deformed way. If you want to restore their memories, you have to find a way to remove this sticking state, but I haven't thought of any way to do it so far." After listening to Anduin's words, Augusta stood up and paced for a while, then tilted his head and asked, "In other words, as long as we find a way to remove their special memory state, we can restore their memories?" "In theory, it is, but the operation is very difficult." Anduin answered. "Oh, why is that?" Augusta asked. "Memory is not like bricks. After building a wall, you can turn it back into bricks by cutting it. Memory fragments are very fragile. If you operate it carelessly, it may even cause secondary damage." Anduin sighed. "Moreover, this state is too rare." Anduin has read many books related to memory magic, but he has not found any similar records. If he starts from scratch, there is no similar material to conduct experiments. He can't just use Frank and Alice for experiments. If something goes wrong, it will harm him instead. Augusta also sighed. "I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Maybe this is the fate of the two of them." "Thank you, Anduin. I appreciate your kindness. I have enough tolerance. Even if they can't recover in their lifetime, as long as I can see them often, I will be very happy. You don't have to be so pessimistic." Anduin frowned. I will think of a way. Although I don't have any clues now, I know the reason, at least there is hope. Augusta thought Anduin was comforting her, forced a smile and nodded. Okay, let's stop here today, it's time for us to go back. The two walked out of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Injuries with heavy hearts. A few days passed after returning to the Longbottom Mansion. During this time, Anduin searched for a lot of relevant information, but he was still at a loss. It seemed that he would not be able to find a solution for a while. It seems that I have to find a way to expand the reserve of information, so that I can get rid of that guy by the way. Anduin thought. The next day, Anduin told Augusta that he was going to Diet Mally and would go back later. Then he took the Muggle transportation to the Leaky Cauldron. Walking into the Leaky Cauldron, Tom, who had not been seen for 3 years, was still the same. He was wiping glasses behind the bar alone. However, there were some differences in the bar from the last time Anduin came. There were customers in the store, and there were quite a few of them. When passing by several tables, he saw several customers with fried chicken on their plates. It seemed that the recipe he left for Tom was quite popular. Boss, give me a butterbeer. Tom, who was concentrating on wiping his wine glass, heard a familiar voice, looked up, and laughed. Ha ha, Anduin, you still remember to come back to see me, you heartless guy, we haven't seen each other for 3 years, right? Yeah, I was always entangled with some trivial matters before, and this is the first time I have returned to Diet Mally after so many years. Your business is good. Anduin smiled slightly. It's all thanks to you. The menu you gave me is very popular. Maybe you can consider opening your own bar in the future. Tom was very happy to see Anduin again, and poured a large glass of butterbeer and pushed it in front of him. The two long-lost friends met again, and there was always endless topics to talk about. The two soon chatted together, and Anduin also learned about the changes in the Leaky Cauldron and Diet Mally in the past 2 years. Since the disappearance of the mysterious man, those wizards who had been hiding have come out to party and revel. During that time, Tom's business was so good that there was almost no room for people to stand in the bar. However, after a while, those unattended Death Eaters came out to stir up trouble. You have to know that many of those guys are crazy, and they are wanted and hunted, so they acted more and more recklessly, causing great damage. Diet Mally was even under martial law for a period of time. However, under the leadership of Millicent Barnold, the Ministry of Magic was very efficient. Frequent arrests arrested some Death Eaters and quickly suppressed the riots. The remaining Death Eaters either fled or hid, or had backgrounds behind them to escape punishment. Since about half a year ago, Diet Mally has returned to peace, and the situation is basically the same everywhere in the magic world. Chapter 153 Tracking. Then do you know if there were any suspicious people in Diet Mally or Nocturne Alley some time ago? Like dark wizards? Anduin asked Tom. Dark wizards? You mean Death Eaters? Tom glanced at Anduin, a little curious about why he cared about such a problem, but still said truthfully. Diet Mally is full of wanted posters of Death Eaters now. Those dark wizards have no time to hide, so why would they come here? As for Nocturne Alley, I'm not sure. The situation there is complicated, and most of the wizards who go there will not pass by me. Most of them go through Borgin and Burke's fireplace. Anduin nodded and smiled, so that's how it is. I'm just a little curious. Let's talk to you about this today. I still have to go to Diet Mally to buy some things. I'll meet you again when I have time. After that, he walked through the bar hall and went to the backyard patio. Tom watched Anduin leave. The young wizard had changed a lot in the past 2 years. From the conversation just now, he noticed that something seemed wrong, but he couldn't tell what it was. After passing through the patio, Anduin skillfully opened the stone door of Diet Mally. The streets of Diet Mally that came into view were very lively, in sharp contrast to the deserted scene 3 years ago. People came and went in the alley, and many wizards set up temporary stores on both sides of the street. The business atmosphere was very strong. It seems that the wizarding world is still quite prosperous in peacetime. Anduin glanced around with interest, then walked to their side of the road and took out a compass-shaped prop from his body to observe something. If the display is correct, Yaxley should be hiding in Diet Mally. He can hide here safely, either because of his family's protection, or because other Death Eaters are taking him in. In this way, no matter what, the harvest will not be too little. Anduin muttered with a sneer. He had done something to Yaxley in the battle before Christmas. He had implanted a newly developed soft needle-like magic locator in his shoes, clothes, belt, and even underwear. It could form a set with the compass-style tracking disc in his hand. There were several pointers on the tracking disc, each of which would point to a locator and roughly display that distance. Now all the pointers were pointing in the same direction and the same distance, so the one being tracked must be Axley. Anduin walked to an empty alley nearby, took out a dark cloak and put it on to cover his face, then walked in the direction indicated on the tracking disc. Along the streets of Diagon Alley, passing Gringotts, he found his target on the north side of Diagon Alley. It was a simple stone building with 3 floors, separated from the buildings on both sides by a 1-meter wide path. There was no shop on the first floor, and there was no company sign. It didn't look like a commercial building, but more like a private residence. But this is a street-side location in Diagon Alley. Although it is not the most likely front half, it is also a good location in the middle. If it is a commercial company like Obscure Books, it will generally choose a building that is not on the street. After all, the rent in Diagon Alley is not cheap. It is not a store or a company, and it does not care about the rent. Is it a private property of a family? After a little thought, Anduin made his own judgment. Standing opposite this building, the pointer on the tracking disc in his hand pointed directly at this building. After moving to the small alley next to the house, the pointer also changed its direction as it moved, still pointing to this small building. It seems that it is right, this is it, but the door here is closed, and I don't know the situation inside. I can't go in rashly. I still have to collect some information first. After walking around the house, Anduin began to observe the surroundings. On both sides of the house, there was a building called Ms. Pimpernel's Beauty Pharmacy. On the other side was a house without a sign. Opposite was the flood powder manufacturer, the Flood Powder Company. The door was closed. Flood Powder was next to Gringotts in the direction of the Leaky Cauldron, and on the other side was the Diagon Alley Cave. Across the window was the Diagon Alley Cave. Anduin saw an acquaintance, Emmeline Vance. At this time, Emmeline was sitting by the window leisurely drinking coffee, but her eyes occasionally glanced at the house across the street where Axley was hiding. Oh? Did the Aurors, or the Order of the Phoenix, also notice this place? It seems that the intuition of Day was correct. Dumbledore really has his eyes on Axley. Is he trying to follow their clues? Anduin pulled the cloak in front of him to hide his face more deeply. But why don't these Aurors just break in and arrest people? Is there anything special about the owner of this house? After thinking it over, he thought that the intelligence was still insufficient and he had to find a way to collect some information. Let's start with the buildings adjacent to this house. There is Emmeline in the coffee shop, and he doesn't want to be easily exposed. Then there is only Ms. Pimpernel's Beauty Pharmacy. After making up his mind, Anduin pushed open the door of the beauty pharmacy. Ms. Pimpernel has been in a good mood recently. Since the martial law was lifted in Diagon Alley, the business of the store has finally returned to normal levels, and even the flow of customers has increased. She was managing the counter when she heard the sound of the doorbell. She was happy that there was another business coming to the door. When she turned around, she saw a wizard who covered himself tightly with a cloak. This is not surprising. Many witches make potions at home and make their faces messy. As shown on her sign, helping witches solve tumors and troubles is what she is best at. Welcome, dear lady, you seem to need the help of beauty potions. Please don't be shy, no matter how terrible your face becomes, your troubles can be solved here. When Pimpernel was about to use the standard rhetoric she invented to fool the guests, she found that the person who pulled down the cloak was actually a young and handsome boy, which made her speechless for a moment. Is this a man? Or a lady with a tough look? Or a fool who drank the wrong potion and turned herself into this? To be honest, she can see all kinds of people here. She has even seen witches who have made themselves look like cats. Just as she was considering what words to use to address the guest, the other party spoke first. Hello, I am here to choose gifts for the elders in my family. Do you have any recommendations? Anduin looked at the day's boss and asked. Chapter 154. Flying Crow Technique. Ms. Pimpernel reacted quickly and came up to him with a big smile on her face. So that's how it is. I was just curious why I've never seen such a handsome young wizard. What type of potion do you want to prepare for your family? Is it to eliminate those little facial annoyances, or to remove wrinkles, or simply to beautify and enhance their appearance? Listening to Ms. Pimpernel's flattery, Anduin had no expression on his face at first, but thinking that he should give some feedback, he forced a smile and said, My aunt is old and has a lot to worry about every day. She has been a little haggard recently, so do you have any suitable potion to recommend? Before he could finish, Ms. Pimpernel immediately took over the conversation. Is that so? Then I recommend that you choose our store's secret recipe Prim Awakening Potion. Apply it once in the morning and evening on your face to tighten the skin, delay aging, and improve your complexion. This is our flagship product. As she spoke, Ms. Nell took Anduin to a container, took out a beautifully packaged potion bottle and showed it to him. She also applied some on the back of her hand and slowly scratched it. The effect of the potion was still very obvious. The part where the potion was applied had become smooth and tight. After Anduin took the potion bottle, he put it to his nose and sniffed it slightly, then frowned slightly. This seemed to be a diluted beauty potion. He had made some to make extra money, so he had some understanding of the properties of this potion. The formula of this potion is not common, and it is a bit troublesome to prepare. However, the materials are not expensive, but the production cycle is not short, and the price is not expensive. This is why he doesn't make much money from this potion. He looked down at the price tag. Wow, 2 gold galleons per bottle. This thing has been diluted by at least half. So shady. How can women's money be made so easily? However, considering that he was here to get information, Anduin still nodded with a smile. Yes, I want a bottle, please package it for me. Seeing that the young wizard in front of him was so happy, Ms. Nell was in a better mood and quickly packaged the potion for him. At this time, Anduin pretended to chat casually and asked, by the way, do you know whose house next door is? Our family recently intends to open a store in Diagon Alley. The location of the house next door is good, and it doesn't seem to have much business. Oh, open a store? What kind of store are you going to open? Ms. Nell asked with some vigilance. She didn't doubt the identity of the young wizard in front of her. Anduin was well dressed and quick-witted. He looked like the heir of a wealthy family. What she cared about was whether he was a colleague who came to steal the business. It should be an alchemy prop store. There is only one boutique store specializing in Quidditch supplies in Diagon Alley, and there are not many alchemy supplies sold. Anduin saw Ms. Nell's concerns and explained. I see. Ms. Nell breathed a sigh of relief. If you like the shop next door, it might be a bit troublesome to rent it. Oh, why? That house hasn't had any business for a long time, and almost no one knows who the property belongs to. The owner of the house is mysterious. Ms. Nell paused, as if recalling something. But some time ago, I occasionally saw Julia Malfoy coming in and out of the room. Oh no, it should be Julia Travers. I always forget that she has married into the Travers family. Maybe you can ask the Travers family. Travers. Hearing this name, Anduin immediately sorted out his thoughts. It seems that enemies will meet again. You're really everywhere, he secretly complained in his heart. Seeing Anduin lowering his head and wondering what he was thinking, Ms. Nell continued, I advise you not to open an alchemy shop. Those long-winded alchemy props are not very popular in the UK. It is difficult to repair them after they break down. Aren't those gadgets all Egyptian specialties? There was an alchemy shop in Diagon Alley before, but the goods sold were not popular at all, and it went bankrupt soon. If your family is really interested, you might as well open a bar. Tom's place at the door is full of people every day. The bar business will definitely be good. Ignoring Ms. Nell's chatter, Anduin smiled and paid the money, put away the potion and walked out of the store without looking back, regardless of the witch boss's attentive greeting. After leaving the store, Anduin immediately put on his cloak, and then looked at the exquisitely packaged inferior potion in his hand. The bottle is quite beautiful, so it's better not to throw it away. Go back and pour out the potion and use it to hold other potions. After collecting his things, Anduin went to the Owl post office and sent a quick letter to Augusta, saying that he would stay at the Leaky Cauldron to catch up with the boss Tom, asking her not to wait for him and asking Tailwind to reply. After doing all this, Anduin still wore a cloak and squatted in a narrow alley opposite the house. If nothing unexpected happens, it is the Tivlas family who is protecting Yaxley. The problem now is how to catch them all in one fell swoop. The Aurors of the Ministry of Magic will definitely not break in to search for them due to procedural justice or their status as members of the Tivlas Patriarch Council. Anduin looked at the quiet house that seemed to be empty and thought. And there are probably traps or warning devices set up here. There must be a fireplace in the house. If we rush in rashly, we may alarm them. At the time, these guys will probably escape through the Flun network or apparition. This may be another reason why the Aurors and the Phoenix department did not try. If we rush in and find that there is no one inside, it is easy to fall into a passive position politically. Moreover, this is Diagon Alley. If a battle breaks out, it is easy to cause accidental injuries. It seems that we have to find out the situation inside before we can act. First, we have to conduct a reconnaissance operation. Anduin thought. He saw him gently lift up a corner of his cloak, and a dark raven flew out and flew straight to the house. After studying blood magic for so long, it is not without results. At least the shared vision technology of the flock of birds was developed in time. Unfortunately, the current operating range is only about 100 meters, which is barely usable. Anduin gently closed one eye, and then the vision of the raven emerged in his mind. After the little raven flew out, it crossed the path in diagonally and flew over the house. It circled in the sky for a few times before landing on a windowsill on the 3rd floor. Chapter 155 Investigation. The scene in the room also appeared in Anduin's eyes. Inside the window was an empty bedroom, but the decoration was very neat. There were some sundries on the desk, and a few clothes hanging on the hanger next to it. It looked like someone lived there. Then the little raven stopped and investigated along the windowsill of the entire 3rd floor. There was no one on the entire 3rd floor. It was all bedrooms for rest, but there were signs of people living everywhere, and there was more than one person. Anduin saw that there was no valuable information on the 3rd floor, so he controlled the little raven to come to the windowsill of the 2nd floor. At this time, he made a discovery. The window was facing a hall, and several people were gathered inside to chat about something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in total. Yaxley is indeed inside. One of them is Torkel Travs, who I saw at the station and in Sample's memory. He is his uncle. There are 3 others, who must be Death Eaters. Then the little raven went around the entire 2nd floor and observed it again. No one else was found. It seemed that only these few people lived here now, and it just matched the information of the bedroom on the 3rd floor. Next, we have to find out the security configuration of this house. It seems that I have to test my dual operation ability. He lifted his cloak, and another little raven appeared at his feet. Anduin moved his mind and controlled the 2nd little raven to fly back into the sky. After circling for a while, it landed on the chimney of the house. All the doors and windows of this house were tightly closed. It seemed that there was only one way to get in. The original number 1 little raven still stayed on the 2nd floor windowsill, watching the situation of the people inside. Raven 02 didn't hesitate and immediately went into the chimney. After just a reconnaissance outside, he knew that there was a fireplace on each floor of this house, and the little raven appeared first in that fireplace on the 3rd floor under Anduin's control. From the perspective of Raven 01, it can be seen that these Death Eaters did not react. Very good, it seems that there is no warning magic in the chimney pipe. Next, let's find out the situation on the 3rd floor. Raven 02 stuck its head out of the fireplace and looked around, then wandered around the 3rd floor with a figure-8 step. The area of this small building is not small. The 3rd floor consists of a small living room and 6 rooms. One of them is a bathroom, and the remaining 5 are bedrooms. There are 2 pairs of sofas facing each other in the small living room, with a wooden coffee table in the middle, and various cabinets of different heights and a clock next to it. After circling the entire small living room for several times, Raven 02 did not trigger any alarms. Through the raven's vision, Anduin could not see where the warning magic was cast in the room. It seems that there is no warning magic on the ground. If the floor is also enchanted, they can't walk by themselves. They always step on it accidentally and scare themselves. Leaving the center of the small living room, Raven 02 began to search along the corners and walls. Anduin did not control the raven to try to touch the wall. He had seen various protective spells at Lily's place, and many warning spells were triggered. Following the corner, Raven 02 came to the window. The little raven looked up and looked carefully. Soon he found that on the inner windowsill, as time passed, a faint rune would occasionally emerge. This situation often occurs on ordinary items that are temporarily enchanted. If it is an alchemical item with good material and the spell is engraved with the method of dark engraving, such obvious magic overflow will not occur under normal circumstances. It seems that there is indeed a warning magic on the door, but I don't know if there is on the wall. There is no rush. Let's go to the bedroom first. Anduin, who was controlling the raven, thought. After coming up with an idea, Anduin controlled Raven 02 to the doors of several bedrooms. The doors were all dark wooden doors that looked a bit old. After careful observation, he found that the doors were also cast with magic. The other rooms were confirmed to be the same. That is to say, there are warning spells on all the doors and windows, so it seems that sneaking in from these places is not possible. Unfortunately, I can't apparition, otherwise it wouldn't be so troublesome. So what should I do? After thinking for a while, Anduin's eyes lit up. I got it. I can poison them first, knock these guys down, and then come in. With a plan, Anduin controlled Raven 2 to start looking for food and water, but after a circle, he found that there was no food stored on this floor, and there was also a spell on the door of the bathroom, so he could only go downstairs to take a look. Just now, when Raven 1 was scouting outside, he found that the kitchen was on the second floor. The layout of this house seemed to be prepared for commercial stores. The first floor was very empty, the second floor had a kitchen, bathroom, and living room, and the third floor was basically bedrooms. Then Raven 2 tiptoed slowly towards the stairs. He was afraid of making a noise and alerting everyone. When he arrived at the stairs, he observed and confirmed that there was no spell cast on the stairs, and then walked down the stairs step by step. The little raven was very flexible when flying, but it was too difficult to control it to walk down the stairs and ensure silence. There was a 180-degree corner in the middle of this staircase. After passing the corner and another flight of stairs, you will reach the second floor. After finally reaching the corner in the middle of the stairs, Raven 2 did not rush to continue walking down, but stretched his head and glanced at it at a very fast speed, and then immediately retracted it. After a quick glance, he found that the stairs were facing the living room. He could even see the backs of the Death Eaters, and an open kitchen was next to them, but he noticed something more. There was a spyglass hanging above the living room. And judging from the size, it was a high-end product, but it did not trigger the spyglass's alarm. The people in the living room were talking enthusiastically and did not notice it. Raven 2 stuck his head out and glanced at the mirror again, and found that the mirror really didn't respond. It seems that the shared vision state will not trigger the alarm of the mirror. It's a pity that the current flying raven technique has only developed a low-quality vision sharing, and it can't receive sound. Otherwise, I can listen to what they say. Although the mirror will not respond to the little raven, the kitchen is too conspicuous. It's better not to take risks. Give up the poisoning plan and go back to the third floor to think of other ways. Anduin frowned slightly, adjusted his thinking and thought. After returning to the third floor, Raven 2 paced back and forth in the house, looking at the window and the bedroom door, thinking over and over again about the possibilities of various operations. Chapter 156 Conversation. Unfortunately, the vision sharing of the little raven did not allow him to see things as if he saw them with his own eyes. In today's words, the resolution was not high enough, which made it impossible for him to identify the rooms enchanted in the house with his naked eyes. In addition, the little raven could not cast spells, so there was no way to break these warning magics from the inside. It seems that there is no way to sneak in. Do I really have to attack them by force, or lure them out to solve the problem? He was suddenly attracted by something. Raven 2 was controlled to stand in front of a bedroom door, staring at the crack of the door. This door should be a standard 80 cm 2 meters specification, but the crack is much larger than the regular one, at least 1.5 cm wide. If that's the case, there is a way. Anduin's eyes lit up, and something suddenly came to his mind, and he immediately had an idea. Then let's test whether there is any defensive magic on the wall at the end. Anduin thought. Then Raven 2 walked to a wall and pecked it gently with his beak. Nothing happened. Then he pecked along the wall until he saw the outer wall with windows. Then he responded. Through the vision of Raven 1, he saw that the faces of the people on the second floor seemed to have noticed something and their faces changed rapidly. In the living room on the second floor of the house, Torkel Travis, who was talking with 4 other people, changed his expression and quickly drew out his wand. The other people also reacted quickly and drew out their wands to be alert. The alarm on the third floor has been triggered. Karkaroff, you go up and check it. The others stay alert. Torkel looked at the bearded man and said. Me again? Karkaroff pouted reluctantly, but there was no way. He had been in exile and could only seek refuge in Travs. Holding the wand tightly in his hand, Karkaroff walked upstairs step by step. Torkel on the second floor looked at the others with a gloomy expression. Yaxley, Boyle, Cragday, each of you grab a handful of flood powder first, and move to Travs Manor if something goes wrong. The other 3 nodded, and each of them went to the fireplace and grabbed a handful of powder, ready at all times. Karkaroff, who came upstairs, carefully poked his head to check, and found no one. Then he carefully checked every place, including every bedroom, but found nothing. Just when he was feeling strange, there was a sudden knocking sound outside the window, and he sensed the warning magic fluctuation again. Karkaroff quickly pointed his wand to the location where the sound came from, but found that it was a little crow pecking at the glass stupidly at the windowsill. Phew, Karkaroff breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that you, the little guy, were scaring people. He walked to the window, pointed his wand at the window, muttered something, then opened the window and waved his hand to drive away the little crow. Then he carefully stretched his head out of the window to scan the situation and diagonally. After finding that everything was normal, he closed the window again and cast a spell on the window again. Then he returned to the second floor with peace of mind. Torkia saw that Karkaroff came back with a relaxed expression and knew that nothing should have happened, but he still asked carefully, "What happened?" "A stupid crow hit the window. It should have triggered the alarm. I have driven it away and checked. No one came in." Karkaroff sat back on the sofa and laughed. When everyone heard that it was a mistake, they all breathed a sigh of relief and put down the flood powder in their hands and sat down. Karkaroff saw that these people were ready to run away at any time, and he felt uncomfortable. "It seems that in your eyes, I'm a burden that can be abandoned at any time," so he curled his lips in dissatisfaction, but did not say much. Torkel saw his expression and knew that Karkaroff was dissatisfied, but he did not care at all. He continued to watch everyone and continued the previous topic. "Let's stay here for a while. My brother is under a lot of pressure now. Millicent Barnard is trying to win over those wavering families. If the situation is not right, you can flee abroad together and wait for the Dark Lord to summon you in the future. But, I still can't bear to do it. Boyle's child has just turned 3 years old." Krappe hesitated. "Yes, let your brother help contact some pure blood families to make arrangements. You see, many people have escaped the pursuit, such as you and Malfoy. Why can you just be fine, and we have to?" Boyle, who was stardy, was interrupted by Torkel before he finished speaking. "Enough, didn't I tell you? That woman Millicent has gone crazy, and now she's bent on carrying out a purge, and she has Dumbledore's support behind her. Do you think my situation is easy now? Now they might even bring up the old things again. It's all the fault of the damn McKinnon family. They've been biting me and won't let go." Torkel shouted angrily, then took a breath and soothed her. "I know your difficulties, but the situation is not optimistic now. I have contacted Julia, and she has convinced Lucius Malfoy to help take care of your wife and children, and when the Dark Lord returns in the future, we can still get back everything we have lost. But, many people say that the Dark Lord is already dead. Maybe we just need to tell the Ministry of Magic that we were actually controlled by the Dark Lord with the Imperious Curse, and we were forced." Then, Karkaroff was a sturdy man, but he said timidly, and then he was given a fierce look by Torkel. As if he was very angry at Karkaroff's words, Torkel stood up and grabbed Karkaroff's collar, staring at him fiercely, and shouted, "The Dark Lord is immortal. Do you want to betray us?" "No, that's not what I mean. I mean pretend, just pretend." Karkaroff was frightened by Torkel and explained quickly. "Humph, do you think they are fools? You are wanted and absconded, and now you are still dreaming about this. Even I, who was raised on bail, have to avoid those guys now. Why should they let you get away with it?" Torkel mocked and looked at Yaxley again. "What's wrong? You haven't said a word since just now. What are you thinking about?" "Me?" Yaxley was awakened from his daze by Torkel. "Nothing, but when Karkaroff mentioned the crow just now, it reminded me of someone, a damn little wizard. Is it that Anduin Wilson?" Torkel actually knew Anduin's name. "I lost again, classic runner-up. It's really sad to see. When will Kendo to stand up again?" Chapter 157 Preparations before action. "Yes, it was that damned mudblood who made me like this. I can't bear to let him escape like this." Yaxley recalled some painful memories, his eyes red as he spoke. Sample mentioned the guy to me 2 days ago. He dared to beat and insult my nephew and trample on our noble honor. I won't let him go." Torkel sneered sinisterly. "What do you mean?" Yaxley looked up at Torkel. "I have asked someone to investigate. That little bastard is now living in the Longbottom family. Before you leave England, we can just get rid of him and the old stubborn man in the Longbottom family. You'll have a chance to take revenge then." Torkel patted Yaxley on the shoulder and said, "Really? But you got away with it so hard." Yaxley has been brooding over the torture by Anduin. The piercing pain that penetrated his bones still cannot be shaken off. At first, he would be awakened by nightmares at night. Leave no one alive. They are just a bunch of old, weak women and children. If it doesn't work, I will leave with you. However, before we leave, we must make a big scene to let them know the consequences of going against us. Torkel took a deep breath and looked at Yaxley. After we get rid of them, we will go to Europe to join your brother and the carers. Even if we leave Britain, we can still make a name for ourselves. Okay. Yaxley's expression gradually became ferocious and crazy, and he responded with hatred. Boyle and Crappe looked at each other and knew that there was no other way of this time. Since Torkel had thought of a way out, they nodded and agreed. Only Karkaroff on the side still had a bitter face. He thought that he could do whatever he wanted after joining the Dark Lord, but he knew that he suddenly became a wanted criminal, and now he was living under someone else's roof and could only obey Travs. On the other side. At this time, Anduin had already left the place wearing a cloak. Just after Aveno. To trigger the alarm on the outer wall, he immediately hid in the fireplace and hid in time. He also directed Raveno. One to come to the window on the 3rd floor to cover him, so as not to reveal his tracks. According to the intelligence just detected, all the outer walls, windows, and doors of the house were cast with warning and protection spells, which were difficult to crack from the outside. There was also a peephole hanging on the 2nd floor. It was likely that they would move the peephole to wherever they were, so it would be very difficult to break through or sneak in secretly. The inner walls and fireplaces were not cast with warning magic. If they wanted to avoid alerting others, they would only use them as a breakthrough point. He kept sketching out the three-dimensional model of the house in his mind, judging the feasibility of the plan later, and then nodded firmly. The success rate of the operation was very high, and the next step was the preparation stage. With a plan in mind, Anduin did not stay around the house, but quickly returned to the Leaky Cauldron and booked a room with Tom, saying that he would stay there for one night. This made Tom very happy, and he generously waived Anduin's room fee. At this time, Tailwind also arrived. It seemed that Augusta had received the message from her. With the owl, Anduin also went upstairs to his room. After putting Tailwind on the owl stand in the room, Anduin scratched its head and said softly, "You wait here for me to come back. I will treat you to a good meal later. You have a lot of work to do later. Don't let down at the critical moment." After comforting Tailwind a few words, he added some water and nuts to it, and then Anduin cast an illusion spell on himself, then pushed open the window of the room and flicked out. After leaving the Leaky Cauldron, Anduin took out a map of London and searched for something on it. After a while, he seemed to have found his target and ran straight in a certain direction. If you look at the map, the place Anduin went to was a small warehouse for storing medical equipment and chemical materials. And Shunfen was taking a nap in the room. 2 hours later, when it was getting dark, it was awakened by the sound of the window opening again, and the owner who had always tricked it into doing hard labor reappeared in front of it. We finally got everything together after rushing around. Let's go, Shunfen, let's go downstairs and have a good meal. With a chubby owl on his arm, Anduin went downstairs as if nothing had happened, and cooked a large table of dishes for himself, Tom and Shunfen, and then enjoyed dinner with Tom. There were still many customers in the bar at this time, and when they smelled the fragrance coming from Anduin's table, they looked over here frequently. The boss Tom talked with Anduin while tasting the food, and it was not until after 9 o'clock in the evening that Anduin led his owl back to the room. After Anduin returned to the room, he acted quickly. First, he went to the desk, took out parchment and wrote a few letters. Then he came to Shunfen and said, "Shunfen, your mission tonight is very important. I will tie a communication clawing on you later. Pay attention to the messages I send you, just like we played in the Forbidden Forest hut. Do you understand?" Shunfen saw his master looking at him so seriously for the first time, and he nodded seriously at this time. "Very good, take good care of these 2 letters. If I send you a signal tonight, it means that the operation is not going well and needs support. You should immediately send these 2 letters to Moody and Dumbledore of the Ministry of Magic respectively." Anduin took out 2 white envelopes and gestured to it. Then he took out 2 brown envelopes and explained to Shunfen, "If you receive 2 signals, it means everything is going well. One of these 2 letters will be delivered to Moody at the Ministry of Magic at 6 o'clock tomorrow, and the other one will be delivered to Rita Skeeter of the Daily Prophet a little later, around 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. You must confirm that she received it personally." Shunfen tilted his head, as if he was seriously confirming Anduin's order, and then nodded seriously. "Finally, if you receive 3 signals, it means that the operation cannot continue, but the enemy has not discovered me, so you don't have to do anything. But no matter what signal I give you in the end, you must deliver the last letter to Augusta afternoon tomorrow, and then you don't have to return, just wait for me at the Longbottom's house." Anduin was cautious and repeated the purpose of several letters to Shunfeng several times. Chapter 158 Multithreading. After confirming that Tailwind understood everything, Anduin sorted the letters and placed them on the desk. Then he cast the disillusionment charm on himself again, climbed out the window, and disappeared into the night. Perhaps because the magic world had just returned to peace, Diag Alley was quite quiet at night. Except for the occasional wizard walking in the alley, there were no extra people, and most of the shops on both sides of the street had closed early. Anduin, who had disappeared, floated quietly in the air 1 foot above the ground, heading towards the house where the 5 Death Eaters were hiding. At this time, the magic coffee shop opposite the house and the beauty pharmacy next to it were closed, and England Vance, who was originally monitoring here, had disappeared. As it was unclear whether these orals had gone off work or were hiding around to continue monitoring, Anduin carefully circled the house and searched for a long time. After eliminating several suitable monitoring locations around, he was relieved. After making sure that no one would disturb him, he summoned Raven as he did in the morning, and flew to the windowsill on the 3rd floor of the house to observe. Of the 5 guest rooms, 4 had already drawn their curtains and turned off the oil lamps in the room, so nothing could be seen clearly. The bedroom without the curtains still had a faint light on, and it was Yaxley who was sitting at the desk in the light of the oil lamp, folding a letter and stuffing it into an envelope. After he finished all this, he stretched himself tiredly, took off his coat and shoes, turned off the oil lamp, and went to bed without changing his clothes. After lying on the bed, he took out his wand and pointed at the window, controlling the curtains to slowly close. Looking at Yaxley's condition, they should all be sleeping fully armed. Are they preparing to escape immediately if something happens? They are well prepared. Anduin nodded thoughtfully, and then still covered the disillusionment spell, waiting quietly in the narrow alley next to the house. In the silence of the night, Anduin waited for more than half an hour, thinking that these guys should all be asleep, so he used the supernatural levitation technique and slowly flew to the roof of the hut and landed. Then he summoned another raven in the same way, and went down the chimney to the 3rd floor to check the situation, while Raven 01 was still on the windowsill outside the house to be alert, so that no matter what happened in the room, he could react quickly. Raven 02, who entered the 3rd floor, looked up and saw that the mirror he had seen in the morning had been moved to the 3rd floor by the moonlight. However, at this time, the mirror did not react to the little raven in the shared vision state. After Raven 02 walked around the 3rd floor with a figure-8 step, it did not trigger any alarm. After confirming that it was safe, Anduin controlled it to return to the roof along the original route. Very good, it seems that the alert mode at night has not changed, so the next step is to test my operating ability. Anduin muttered after taking a deep breath. Then Anduin began to carefully take things out of his space bag. The first thing was a large metal bottle that looked like a medical oxygen cylinder. Then there was a large bundle of plastic hoses of various sizes. He used magic to control these items to float quietly in the air, and then began to splice them. He first installed a thicker industrial plastic tube on the gas cylinder, installed a diverter on the other end, and then slowly extended the hose down the chimney. Then Anduin summoned several ravens, some holding or grabbing a few bundles of long thin tubes, and also flew from the chimney to the 3rd floor. After arriving on the 3rd floor, these ravens became busy. 2 of the ravens adjusted the position of the thick tube and slowly pulled it out of the fireplace, while the others installed the thin tube and the diverter together. Since the hoses were connected with metal nuts, these little ravens had to use their mouths to tighten the nuts one by one. After all this operation, Anduin was already sweating profusely. He had to distract himself and control several ravens at the same time, and he had to be careful not to make any noise. When all the preparations were completed, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. After the tools were ready, he controlled the ravens to hold one end of the long thin tubes and came to the door of each room, and then slowly extended the thin tubes through the cracks in the doors. He was very careful in this step, because he was afraid of touching the door and setting off the alarm, so he did it room by room. After doing all this, Anduin opened the valve of the gas tank next to him, and the gas inside quickly spread to the bedrooms of several people through the main pipeline, the diverter, and the thin tubes. 3% ether inhaled in excess of 2 milliliters will cause coma. According to the size of their rooms, theoretically they will all lose consciousness in 3 minutes. Just in case, we should wait 4 minutes. However, we cannot wait too long. Too high a concentration may directly cause death. I hope none of them have heart disease, otherwise they will just have bad luck. Anduin took out a pocket watch and checked the time, muttering to himself. When he was investigating the layout of the house, he found that all the rooms seemed to have been renovated. It should be to accommodate so many people. The 5 rooms were temporarily spliced together with magic. Each room was about the same size, and the door did not fit the door frame very well. The gap at the bottom of the door was much larger than normal. In addition, the windows were closed, which made him think of using ether as an anesthetic liquid to knock these guys down. However, low concentrations of ether can be used as an anesthetic in medicine, but if used indiscriminately, it will become a terrible poison. Although it is a liquid under normal conditions, it is extremely volatile and can easily cause lung burns after being inhaled. It is also flammable and explosive, and is considered a very dangerous industrial material. He searched for a long time and found some low concentration ether. He had previously gone to a nearby chemical warehouse and finally gathered all the equipment. It is very convenient to use magic to steal things. It is very simple to be invisible, open the door with magic, and put things into the space bag. The more difficult part is to find the materials he needs. 4 minutes passed, and Anduin, who had timed it accurately, quickly closed the valve, and then controlled the little raven that was still inside the house, walked to the door and pecked it lightly, triggering the warning magic on the door to test the reaction of these Death Eaters. After trying twice, there was no movement in the house, which seemed to be successful. Anduin was overjoyed when he saw this, and quickly dismantled the gas tank and put it away, and then put on a gas mask for himself. He had to be careful to deal with this kind of poisonous gas. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 159. Bondage Play. Anduin, who was well prepared, used the extraordinary floating spell to fly to a window facing the small living room on the 3rd floor, and easily opened the window with the unlocking spell. The inside of the window kept flashing with a faint and high-frequency aura, which clearly showed that the warning magic was working. Unfortunately, their owner was unconscious at this time. The peephole above the small living room was also spinning at high speed and releasing light, constantly reminding that someone with malicious intentions was illegally breaking in, and Anduin neatly cast a freezing spell on it. Anduin, who entered the interior, acted very quickly used the unlocking spell to enter a bedroom, ignoring the flashing lights of various warning magics around him, and walked straight to the bed to take away the wand of the Death Eater, and then added a quick imprisonment to tie him up, and then opened the windows of the room for ventilation. If the ether was not quickly dispersed, there would be a risk of burning at any time. After dealing with all 5 bedrooms, Anduin moved several people to the 2nd floor and drew the curtains, and only then did he find time to remove the warning magic of the house. The 5 Death Eaters seemed to have inhaled too much ether. After Anduin's operation, they showed no sign of waking up. However, they were still alive after checking, so it would not affect his next plan. He spent nearly half an hour to remove the warning spell in the house and ventilate the house thoroughly with magic. Then he skillfully cast a spell on the house and attached multiple shielding spells. He was afraid that the screams of these guys would get out and cause trouble for himself. After finishing the work, Anduin quickly took out his pocket watch to check the time. It's exactly 12 o'clock. Time is a bit tight. We must finish the work before 6 in the morning. After thinking about the end, he immediately took action, came to the side of several people, took out the return my pretty fist from his body, and hit each of them with a few heavy punches, instantly waking them up. Ah! The screams and cries of pain echoed in the room one after another. Everyone was awakened by a sharp pain. With the dim light in the dark, the few people who could barely see looked at each other, and they couldn't figure out what happened. They were sleeping, so why did they end up lying in the living room on the 2nd floor? Then they struggled to get up, but immediately found that they were fastened by magic chains and couldn't move at all. Suddenly, a bright light appeared out of nowhere, and a magic light ball floated on the roof, illuminating the room very brightly. However, the sudden strong light hurt the eyes of the few people, and they quickly closed their eyes, and it took a while for them to adapt. At this time, they heard the sound of fiddling with metal utensils, and a voice slowly came out. "Sorry, I forgot that you can't see in the dark, so I just remembered to light a lamp for you." Karkaroff gradually adapted to the situation and saw a young and handsome black-haired boy standing next to him. On a shelf next to the boy's hand, there were many things he couldn't understand, including pliers, a thin metal skewer with a clock-like dial on it, several metal chains, thick syringes, and several empty potions. "Who are you? Why are you here? Why did you tie us up? Let me go! Someone, help!" Even if Karkaroff was stupid, he could see that Anduin was not here for good, so he could only struggle and shout for help. "It's you. How did you find this place? This is a private residence. Are you looking for death? How dare you trespass into the Travs family's place? Let us go." Yaxley recognized Anduin at the first time and roared at him with red eyes. "Okay, Yaxley, can't you see that this guy is obviously well prepared? What do you think is the point of yelling like that?" Torkel, who was standing by, was very calm at this time. He looked at Anduin and smiled. "Anduin, I know you. We met at King's Cross Station, didn't we? Tell me, what do you want to do?" Finally, there is a smart person. I was able to find this thanks to Yaxley. I feel relieved to see that you have raised him fat and white. As for what I am going to do you want to try to guess? Anduin did not stop what he was doing, and kept taking out various tools from the space bag, answering casually. "You?" Hearing Anduin's words, everyone looked at Yaxley with shock and anger. And Yaxley shouted at them with an innocent look on his face. "No, I didn't. This guy is lying. Don't believe this mudblood. Don't be provoked by him." Torkel shouted loudly, then turned his head to look at Anduin and sneered, "Anduin, I admit that you're very brave and clever. You can actually get past the guards here and control us. You just want to stand up for your friend Charles, and you. Is that what you think?" Anduin couldn't help but find it funny, and finally stopped the work in his hands, tilted his head and said, "If you just wanted to avenge my friend, you would have died 100 times. The reason why I get you." Anduin turned and looked at everyone. "On the one hand, I have some small questions that need answers, and on the other hand, the living materials in my hands are really not enough, so I can only trouble everyone." After that, he showed a weird smile to the people lying on the ground. "What do you want to know?" Torkel asked, trying to mobilize his magic power secretly. He was proficient in Wandle's spellcasting, but now he just felt that his lungs were burning. Anduin hit him with something, which made him unable to concentrate. He could only delay time. "For you Death Eaters, will you answer my questions honestly? And don't hold back your magic power. If I can let you cast a spell, I will lose." Anduin looked at Torkel's sneaky movements and said with a smile. Torkel saw that the other party had seen through his calculations, and he was determined in his heart. He chanted a spell with a slight movement on his mouth. Since delaying time didn't work, he would just use force. He didn't believe that a little wizard had plotted against them with a trick from nowhere. They must have the advantage and hard power. Boyle and Crappe beside Torkel also reacted quickly and began to chant. Although their level was average, they could still use a few spells without a wand. But Anduin didn't give them any chance to attack. He suddenly jumped up, swung his right fist with brass knuckles and hit them on the head. The instantaneous severe pain made the magic power they had gathered with great difficulty dissipate instantly. Chapter 160. Living Experiment. I asking for monthly recommendation votes. Within 2 meters, fists are faster. Didn't your parents teach you that? Be quiet. My time is precious. Anduin said coldly. Seeing that all the test equipment was ready, Anduin was too lazy to talk nonsense with these guys. He sealed everyone's mouths with a spell, then walked towards a few people and fumbled around them. Now is the time to check the harvest. Under the malicious eyes of several Death Eaters, Anduin counted his harvest, more than 600 gold galleons, a letter, a lot of silver jewelry and some sundries, daily necessities, etc. At the same time, he also found a small leather bag on Torkel. After checking it, he found that it was an alchemical prop with the untraceable extension spell. Most of these financial items were found in it. After putting these things back into the bag, Anduin punched Torkel again and said with a smile, "You dare to run out with such a small amount of stuff? I feel ashamed for you." Torkel was hit hard and grimaced in pain, but he still stared at Anduin fiercely. Anduin didn't care about it at all. Instead, he lifted the gag spell on Torkel and said gently, "I will borrow your body from now on. Don't worry, I will be very gentle and won't hurt you." "Of course, I said try my best," Anduin complained in his heart. Then Anduin walked to the tool table next to him, picked up a long metal stick with a dashboard, which looked a bit like a European kitchen thermometer, and walked towards them. "First, let's test this magic meter. The previous in vitro test has never been able to accurately measure the magic reserves in the wizard's body. Now we can only try another way to try in vivo testing. Anduin said to himself. Torkel, who was lying on the ground, just watched Anduin walk towards him with an unknown object. For some reason, his hair stood up and he looked at him nervously. What are you doing? Don't come over here. I'm the second heir of the Travs family. I advise you, Just as Torkel was about to threaten him with weak words, Anduin had already walked to his side, and then with a puff, he inserted the entire metal stick straight into Torkel's chest. Blood could not stop seeping out. Later, Anduin used a spell to tighten the wound to stop the bleeding. Damn it. The 4 exceptions around were completely stunned at this time. They didn't expect Anduin to be so cruel and come up to kill people. Anduin ignored the eyes around him, but stared at the dashboard on the metal stick intently. Strange, why is there no response? Logically, after engraving the runes of blood perception, holism, monitoring, blood, life and control, it should be able to monitor the magic value. It was able to sense it during the in vitro test, but the accuracy was too low. Could it be that the sensitivity coefficient was adjusted too high? Anduin pulled out the metal stick expressionlessly, then adjusted it on the dashboard, and then stabbed it into Torkel's chest with a puff. Sorry, I was a little distracted just now. It seems to be inserted off-center, and there is another hole, but don't worry, I will fix it for you later. Anduin looked at the bloody hole and said a little embarrassedly. Torkel could no longer bear it at this time and roared with a hideous face, You damn guy, I want to kill you, what on earth are you going to do to me? He screamed in pain and struggled and twisted his body, but was still pressed to the ground under the suppression of Anduin's barrier spell. Anduin ignored Torkel's shouting. He was now fully devoted to the research work, and his attention was focused on the instrument. Got it. The scale pointer amplitude is stable, and there is no irregular bounce like in the in vitro experiment. It seems that measuring the magic reserve in the living body is indeed feasible. Then Anduin looked at Torkel again and asked, How do you feel now? Do you feel any other discomfort besides pain? Torkel was now forced to the ground, and he only felt a burning pain in his chest. Now Anduin had the nerve to ask him what he felt besides pain. In the face of Anduin's question, Torkel could only give him vicious curses and scolding, as well as wailing that made people numb. The receptor has no adverse reactions and is mentally normal. There are no obvious side effects of using blood magic to measure magic. Anduin saw Torkel's feedback, nodded, and wrote this paragraph on the recording board in his hand. At the same time, he compared the scale of the pointer on the measuring instrument and recorded the value of Torkel's magic reserve. He named the unit of magic as tick, mainly because the instrument panel mainly expressed it in scales. Then, the magic consumed by a standard lumens and flash spell is 1 tick. Lumens and flash is the spell that consumes the least magic among wizard spells, so it is most appropriate to use it as a unit. Originally, he wanted to use the levitation spell as a benchmark, because theoretically the levitation spell consumes less magic, but the levitation spell is a continuous spell, and the magic consumed each time is not uniform, so he still chose lumens and flash. The magic value Torkel measured now is 637 ticks, which means that he needs to use lumens and flash 637 times at a time to consume all the magic, and the magic consumed by a standard disarmament spell is about 3 ticks, so Torkel's magic is enough to support more than 200 times of disarmament. Compared with underage wizards, Torkel's magic reserve is roughly 4 times that of third-year wizards. Judging from this value, Torkel is quite strong. Very good. Next, let's test whether emotional fluctuations will have a significant effect on magic value. After thinking about it, Anduin put away the record board, put on the brass knuckles again, and then beat Torkel's chest crazily until the big hole in his chest was gone. Torkel was already exhausted after being tortured by Anduin before, and he was beaten again by him, and all of it was aimed at the wound on his chest. Coupled with the pain-intensifying runes on the brass knuckles, it was simply a super double pain version. Torkel, whose throat was already hoarse, instantly burst into a thunderous wail. The hoarse sound was like a rusty iron saw, constantly pulling back and forth between everyone's eardrums, which made the 4 people next to him even feel the pain in his body. The empty space around them even intensified the spread of fear in their hearts, and some people even began to tremble uncontrollably. Chapter 161. Living Experiment, Part 2. Seeking monthly votes and recommendation tickets. Anduin was still expressionless like a robot, as if he was not affected by the wailing at all. He was still calmly observing the changes on the dashboard and silently writing and drawing on the recording board. After the receptor experienced intense emotional fluctuations, the magic value did not change significantly. It seems that emotions only affect the strength of magic and will not cause changes in magic reserves. After making a record, Anduin glanced at Torquil. At this time, he had lost consciousness due to the severe pain. His eyes rolled back and he was foaming at the mouth. It seemed that he could not hold on to the next stage of the experiment. I don't know if his memory will change like Frank's after such a strong emotional fluctuation. I will also conduct a memory check later. Pulling out the magic meter inserted in Torquil's body, using the healing spell to treat Torquil's injuries, Anduin turned his head and looked at Goyle next to him. When Goyle saw that Anduin noticed him, he felt like being stared at by a hungry wolf. His hair stood up all over his body, and he kept shaking his head and struggling. His mouth sealed by magic couldn't stop making humming sounds. The meaning was simple. He didn't want to experience the treatment of Torquil. But Anduin didn't care what he thought. He ignored him and inserted the measuring instrument into Goyle's chest. Looking at the value displayed on the measuring instrument, he couldn't help but sneer. You look tall and strong, but how come your magic value is only 469? It's too bad. The next step is to test the second project, the influence of different organs and limbs on the magic value. Logically, after engraving the holistic rune, it should show the same value no matter where it is inserted, but it still needs to be tested to confirm. In the eyes of the other people next to him, Anduin was a different face. This seemingly gentle boy kept pulling out the torture instrument in his hand from Goyle's body, and then inserted it into other parts, starting with the abdomen, lower abdomen, shoulders, then arms, and thighs. And no matter how much blood seeped out of Goyle, Anduin would punch the wound a few times, and then the wound would heal instantly. Under Anduin's constant pulling and beating, Goyle's face was distorted by the continuous pain, and sweat was gushing out like money. In a short while, Goyle's body was covered with blood, sweat, and even a pool of urine. But until the end, Goyle still had no wounds on his body. This young man was simply a devil. Facing the most evil dark wizard in the world was not as terrifying as facing this man. The most unacceptable thing was actually Goyle, Krabe and Karkarouf. They didn't even know Anduin. Why did they have to face these things suddenly when they were sleeping well in the middle of the night? Anduin naturally didn't know what these experimental subjects were thinking, and he didn't care. He just inserted the measuring instrument into the living body very efficiently, and then recorded the data. After a while, he completed the experiment on Goyle. No matter which part is inserted, the magic value measured from the receptor is basically the same, but it will gradually decline as time goes by. Is it because of the loss of blood that causes the magic power to decline? Let's focus on observing this in the third phase of the experiment. Anduin smiled and nodded. Today's experiment was very successful and the data was very accurate. It was hard not to be happy. He smiled, this demon smiled. Is he enjoying Goyle's pain? Is he immersed in the pleasure of torturing others? Karkarouf, Krabe, and Yaxley looked at Anduin with a happy expression, and couldn't help but think of this in their minds. And Torquil, who was gradually waking up, also watched Anduin constantly torturing Goyle, and the anger and resentment in his heart gradually turned into fear. Is this young man cold-blooded? He actually tortured others for fun. At this time, Anduin wiped the blood off the measuring instrument with a handkerchief, and then turned his head to look at his third test subject. After all, Goyle could not bear the torment and had completely fainted. Yaxley, who was being targeted, was now trembling all over, his face as pale as paper, as if covered with a layer of transparent candle. Could it be? Is it my turn? How could I be so naive that I actually wanted to trouble this guy? Without giving Yaxley time to think about it, Anduin neatly inserted the measuring instrument into his chest, as if this was not a person, but a dead pig waiting to be slaughtered. However, this time Anduin did not record the data directly beside Yaxley, but walked to the operating table next to him and took out a glass syringe that was at least 7 or 8 centimeters thick. The lower syringe was connected to a medical infusion tube, and the other end of the infusion tube was a thick needle. The third project of magic measurement is the correlation test between blood and magic. Let's try to see what effect the gradual extraction of blood will have on the magic value. After making up his mind, he began to operate on Yaxley, first pulling out one of his hands, then finding the blood vessels and inserting the needle deeply. Yaxley didn't know what Anduin was going to do. Seeing his actions, he couldn't help but struggle hard. This devil wants to use us to test his torture instruments. No. Seeing Yaxley so uncooperative, Anduin felt a little unhappy. How could he move around with such a long measuring instrument stuck in his chest? After some effort, he suppressed Yaxley with the barrier spell, and Anduin began his own experiment. He began to turn the suction pump of the giant syringe, and then the blood slowly flowed back into the empty tube along the infusion tube, while Anduin stared at the value on the instrument panel. As the blood was slowly drawn out, the pointer on the meter began to slowly shrink, from the original 412 to 410, and at this time Anduin drew nearly 40 milliliters of blood. Based on Yaxley's weight, his blood is around 4,000 milliliters. After drawing out 1% of the blood, the magic value dropped by 2 minutes, which is about 0.5%. So the magic contained in the blood accounts for almost half of the magic of a wizard. Is it the same for all wizards, or are there individual differences? It seems that we have to conduct a blood test on all these people. After thinking of this, Anduin acted quickly, transported the blood from Yaxley's body back, and then drew blood from the other 4 people. He didn't care about the infection problem of these Death Eaters, and didn't change the syringe. He grabbed one and plugged it into the meter to start drawing blood. After conducting a round of tests on 5 people, he came to the conclusion that the magic power contained in blood was indeed close to 50% of that in the human body. Chapter 162. Living Experiment, Part 3. It's the end of the month, please give me a monthly ticket. The magic power contained in blood is so high, so can't we directly measure the magic power contained in the blood and then reversely deduce the wizard's overall magic power reserves? Anduin's eyes lit up when he looked at the collected data, and he thought of a good idea. In this way, if he wants to measure the magic power in the future, he doesn't have to use such a scary measuring instrument to stick it into someone's body. Since the current measuring instrument must have a large enough contact surface to measure accurately, it has to be inserted deep enough into the body, but the new method will obviously be much simpler. First, make an alchemical prop to detect the blood reserves of the human body. This is not difficult to do. Anduin already has an idea in his mind. Then draw a little blood and measure the magic content in the fresh blood. The total amount of blood drawn, the magic value measured by the blood too can get the total amount of magic power of the wizard. What needs to be done next is to calculate these values as accurately as possible, and the scale must be more detailed. Thinking that this experiment suddenly solved a problem that had been bothering him for a long time, Anduin couldn't help but look at everyone with joy. These are all treasures. Next, we must hurry up and do more tests. He laughed again. What does this abominable guy think of us? Toys to play with at will. Not only did he stick us in and out, but he also drew our blood. Who will save me? I'm willing to dedicate my soul to you. Karkaroov looked at Anduin's smiling face and couldn't help shuddering again. He even began to pray devoutly to the real devil in his heart. Okay, the first stage of the experiment ends here, and we will enter the second stage next. The success of the live experiment gave Anduin great confidence. Many problems that had been bothering him for a long time were solved. It turned out that practice is the only condition for testing the truth. Anduin walked to the tool table on the side and picked up another prop. It was a metal chain that looked like a belt. If you look carefully, you can tell that it is composed of 9 flat metal sticks covered with talismans. The metal sticks are twisted together with a very complicated process. He gently placed the metal chain on the ground, then silently chanted a spell, and the chain quickly changed into a small silver snake with a metallic texture, then quickly swung its body towards Yaxley. Anduin inserted the magic meter into Yaxley, and the small snake climbed onto Yaxley at a very sensitive speed. Then it could be clearly observed from the meter that Yaxley's magic power was rapidly decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye, and he himself was like falling into an ice cave, shivering uncontrollably, and his body temperature began to drop significantly. Anduin was holding a timer in his hand at this time, and his eyes frequently switched between the meter and the timer. This silver snake was a new prop he made after testing the incapacitation on Travs. Previously, he disliked the incapacitation's low efficiency in losing magic power, so he first optimized the spell. Secondly, the effect of one incapacitation spell was not obvious, so he made a combination of 9 spells. His original idea was to make a metal net, enchant each knot with incapacitation, and make a soul-binding rope. But unfortunately, the conditions were limited and the materials did not allow it, so he first made a low-profile soul-binding snake, which was quite effective. It can drain the target's mana by 18 ticks per second, which means that each optimized incapacitation spell can drain 2 ticks per second, which is 4 times stronger than when tested on Travs. The effect is still very obvious. With Yaxley's mana reserve, it can drain all his mana in 23 seconds. In addition, the transformed Silver Snape can also assist in entanglement with the opponent, and the obvious hypothermia effect, it can be regarded as a good interference and killing equipment. While he was carefully recording the data, Yaxley wanted to die. He didn't know what Anduin had done to him. As soon as the metal Snape touched him, he felt his magic power was rapidly depleted and he was getting colder and colder. Perhaps freezing to death would be a relief, at least he could finally get rid of this terrible boy. But just when he thought he could finally be free, the magic power loss effect on his body disappeared, and his body temperature began to gradually warm up. It turned out that Anduin had taken back the Silver Snake and cast a warming spell on him. So that's it. Even if I want to die, you won't agree? Hectares. 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 Yaxley had a weird smile on his face at this time, his eyes were blurred and erratic, without a trace of spirit, staring blankly at the ceiling in front of him. Finally, after experiencing this series of mental and physical torture, his mind gradually moved to the edge of madness. Looking at Yaxley grinning, Anduin scratched his head for some confusion. But warming him up, why did he smile? He ignored the other party's reaction and started another experiment. This time, the test subject was Krabby. Anduin took out another item, which consisted of two parts. One part was a baseball-sized, round metal ball. Connected to the metal ball was a thin metal chain, which looked like a small meteor hammer. However, this was not a weapon, but a new alchemical item he had made. He didn't even know how effective it was. There should have been a small metal suction cup at the other end of the metal chain, engraved with the energy absorption spell he was preparing to test, but he had not yet confirmed what kind of rune structure was most suitable. He had a total of 7 suction cups with different rune structures, which he would test one by one later. The metal ball was an energy storage device developed after optimization. In theory, it could store magic power, but of course it would also lose it naturally and could only be stored for a certain period of time. However, compared with those energy storage alchemical items on the market, it was much better, the storage capacity was larger, and the storage time was longer. He moved quickly assembled a suction cup, and then connected it to Krabby's body. Of course, to test the effect, we still need our measuring instrument. Runes 1, 2, 4, and 5 are ineffective. Rune 3 absorbs 1 take of mana every 3 seconds, stores 0.6 take of energy, and has an energy storage efficiency of 0.2 per second. Rune 6 absorbs 1 take of mana every second, stores 0.3 take of energy, and has an energy storage efficiency of 0.3 per second. Rune 7 absorbs 1 take of mana every 2 seconds, stores 0.8 take of energy, and has an energy storage efficiency of 0.4 per second. Chapter 163. Torture, asking for monthly ticket recommendation ticket. From the perspective of energy storage efficiency, it seems that no. 7 is better, but no. 6 absorbs faster. Maybe we can improve it and develop a better new rune by combining the advantages of the two runes. Anduin recorded the data and then thought seriously. However, these tasks can only be completed later. Now that the experiments that need to be done have been done, it is time to start collecting intelligence. He grabbed Torkel's collar and dragged him into the bathroom roughly. Torkel now felt a tingling pain all over his body, and now he even felt a little numb, but the fear he showed when looking at Anduin remained the same. Closing the bathroom door, Anduin pinched Torkel's neck, stared at his eyes, and launched Legilimency. There is memory protection. Anduin browsed Torkel's surface memory, and there was nothing valuable. Just when he was about to explore the depths of his memory, he was blocked, as if a layer of air film covered the core memory. This was the first time he encountered such a situation, and he clearly realized that this was not brain occlusion. What special memory protection spell? The fact that it could still work even when the person had lost the will to exist after being beaten to death really aroused his interest. Unconvinced, Anduin punched Torkel's wound a few more times, but now Torkel no longer had the strength to wail, and his face was twisted instinctively in pain. Then Anduin tried Legilimency a few more times, but still could not break through this layer of memory protection. In that case, the only way is to use Veritaserum. He didn't say anything more, took out a bottle of potion and poured it into the other person's mouth. After drinking the potion, Torkel obviously reacted, and his eyes appeared dull. Name? Torkel Travs. Torkel's dull voice came out. It seems that the truth serum is effective, which makes Anduin perk up again, and then ask the question that he cares about the most and wants to ask the most. Do you know Cyrus Black? Yes, he is a member of the Order of the Phoenix. Did he leak the news about the Potter family to the Dark Lord? Leaked? I don't know. Don't know. According to his understanding, Trav should be a high-ranking Death Eater. How could he not know? Has Cyrus had any contact with the Death Eaters since Christmas 1980? After Christmas, the Dark Lord issued an order to arrest Cyrus. We are all looking for him, but he is hiding very secretly. We have not caught any trace of him. Don't you know that Cyrus betrayed the Potters? I don't know. I also learned the news from the report. Anduin frowned when he heard Torkel's answer. He had actually been looking for the truth about whether Cyrus really betrayed. Hearing such an answer, his doubts deepened. It seems that Torkel does not know the inside story, so he should ask other questions. Which other Death Eaters do you know, their names, and their current locations? Then Torkel reported a long list of names to Anduin, all of which were the information of Death Eaters he knew. Anduin wrote them down one by one. Many of them had been arrested, and some had fled abroad or had been acquitted. Barty Crouch Jr., the child of Barty Crouch, director of the Law Enforcement Department, is a Death Eater. Anduin looked at the name recorded on the record board with some surprise. This was a great discovery. In his impression, Director Barty Crouch was a serious and hateful person. Could it be that he had been pretending all along? Or did he not know about his child? But now he did not dwell on it too much. Time was running out and he had many questions to understand. What is the magic that protects your memory? Slytherin Mind Protection Charm. Oh? Could it be a spell passed down by Slytherin? How did you learn it? Where did you learn it from? And what is the spell? I didn't learn it and don't know the spell. Then where did the protection spell on you come from? After I was released on bail, Yulia was afraid that I would reveal the family secrets, so she cast a spell on me with the help of a magic book. What magic book? It's a magic, Torkel, who was about to answer the question, seemed to be stimulated by something, and his face suddenly became ferocious, as if the words were already lingering on his lips, but were held tightly by something. Can this protection spell still have such an effect? Was it because he had asked about the core secret of his family, and even the truth serum didn't work? Anduin quickly changed the subject. What precious treasures does the Trav's family have? The family treasures are all in the treasure house guarded by Yulia. Among them are the Slytherin manuscript, 5 ounces of refined mithril, and the most valuable are naturally magic. Torkel stopped talking, and then screamed, and his expression became more and more ferocious, as if he was facing something very terrible. Obviously, the mental protection spell not only protected him from the invasion of legilimency, but also prevented him from saying things he shouldn't say. This is no longer a protective magic, it's simply a seal, or a curse. Anduin watched Torkel struggle with his head in his hands for a while, then he tilted his head and fainted. Even he couldn't wake him up with the return my pretty fist, so it was obvious that he couldn't ask anything more. But the harvest was already very great, especially the news about Cyrus. After dragging Torkel out, Anduin interrogated Boyle, Craday, and Yaxley with legilimency and veritaserum, which allowed him to collect a lot of information about the Death Eaters. For example, the letter found on Yaxley was the one he was going to send to his brother who had fled to Europe. Many devout Death Eaters still could not accept the fall of the Dark Lord, so they fled overseas and prepared to accumulate strength there. The letter said that they were going to Europe to join them. Fortunately, I acted quickly, otherwise these guys would have run away in a while. Anduin thought with relief in his heart. Then it was Karkaroof's turn. In the previous experiments, Anduin had tested the least on him, and now he seemed to have retained some spirit, but after witnessing Anduin's methods with his own eyes, he was also scared. Everyone who was dragged into the bathroom by Anduin just now looked demented after coming out. He even imagined dozens of Anduin's punishments in his mind. It's no wonder he thought so. In addition to using legilimency and veritaserum on these Death Eaters, Anduin also modified some of their short-term memories in a very rough way. Chapter 164 Karkaroof, asking for monthly recommendation votes. So when Karkaroof was dragged into the bathroom and the gag spell was lifted, he begged for mercy eagerly. Don't torture me, I surrender, I'm not on the same side as them, please. Karkaroof said with tears streaming down his face and a trembling voice. Looking at this guy with a full beard and a rough face, he was so useless that he couldn't help but feel a little funny. It's not impossible to surrender, but I don't accept people who have no value. Tell me, what's your use? Anduin asked with a teasing look. Seeing that this boy who had always been cold and as cold as ice finally spoke, Karkaroff hurriedly answered attentively. I'm useful. I can do anything for you, including killing people, although I have never done it myself before, but if you need me, I can, and I know a lot of things. I can also help you with advice. Oh? What do you know? Anduin raised his eyebrows, obviously more interested in the information he knew, and asked softly. Whatever you want to know, I will tell you everything, no matter how big or small. Karkaroff said with a flattering smile. Just tell me about the Death Eaters, and tell me some things I don't know. Anduin took out a clipboard and said calmly. Okay, I know the identities of many Death Eaters. Karkaroff swallowed his saliva and said tremblingly, including some with secret identities, such as Severus Snape, who was a Death Eater. He is still a professor at Hogwarts. He is an important person and a confidant of the Dark Lord. That's it? Anduin glanced at Karkaroff with some dissatisfaction. I even fought with him, how could I not know that he is a Death Eater? Karkaroff also noticed that Anduin was somewhat dissatisfied, and hurriedly said, also, there is Barty Crouch Jr., he is the child of the current Director of Law Enforcement. His identity is very secretive, and I just happened to know about it. Hearing this, Anduin looked even more dissatisfied. He kept talking nonsense, and it seemed that this guy was useless. After thinking about it, he grabbed the other's collar and prepared to launch Legislamancy. Don't. Karkaroff saw that Anduin was still dissatisfied, and hurriedly shouted, I know the secret of Torquil-Travs. Huh. Anduin stopped what he was doing. Go on. Yes. Karkaroff panted and said in a trembling voice, it's in this house. Torquil, he, has a basement. I once secretly looked at it. It is well protected. There must be some secrets in it. Listening to Karkaroff's incoherent expression, Anduin couldn't help but have a headache, but he still understood more or less. You mean, you found a basement in this house, and you suspect there's some secret hidden in it? Anduin asked after he sorted out his words. Yeah. Karkaroff swallowed and nodded. This is strange. I haven't seen any related fragments in Torquil's memory before. Could it be hidden under the protection spell? There might be something good hidden there. Okay, let's go and have a look together, but before that, you eat this first. Anduin took out a round ball the size of a little fingertip, which looked a bit like metal and had a bit of a wood texture. What is this? Karkaroff looked at the small pill in front of him with fear. Stop talking nonsense. Anduin didn't explain to him, but pinched his mouth and stuffed it in. After swallowing the pill, Karkaroff felt nauseous. At the same time, he felt that the pill seemed to be alive. After entering the stomach, it seemed to stretch out long legs and crawl onto the stomach wall step by step. Then, it seemed to grow roots and extend something, deeply inserted into the stomach wall. Suddenly, a sharp stinging pain came from the stomach. For a while, Karkaroff rolled on the ground in pain, sweating coldly. If you dare to betray me or disobey me. Anduin stretched out his right fist and made a dispersing motion. I just need to snap my fingers, and you will be like being hit by the thunder explosion spell. Boom, understand? Karkaroff made a bitter face, looked at Anduin humbly, and nodded helplessly. This time he really couldn't get away. His life and death were in the hands of this demon. Seeing that the other party had been completely controlled, Anduin generously untied a binding spell on Karkaroff. Karkaroff, who had regained his ability to move, trembled and climbed up, holding his stomach with one hand, and stood beside Anduin very humbly. Take me to the basement entrance. He planned to follow Karkaroff to see the situation first. If he couldn't open the basement entrance, he would come up to wake up Torquil and force him to remove the protection. Yes, master. Karkaroff quickly brought his identity, and then led the way, taking Anduin to the first floor. Is this it? Anduin asked, with a ball of light on his head, looking at the smooth wall on the side of the stairs on the first floor. Yes, I secretly saw Torquil open a mechanism from here, opened a small door on the staircase wall, and then got in. Karkaroff pointed to the stone wall below the stairs and said. Okay, you ate on the side. After that, Anduin took out the invulnerable hammer from his body, and then smashed it against the triangular wall. Karkaroff, who was standing by, was very confused. What was going on with this little demon? Was he going to smash the wall open? But before he could figure it out, the wall started to react. Magic patterns began to slowly emerge from the places hit by the hammer, flickering faintly in the darkness. After smashing for a while, when all the magic patterns on the wall were revealed, Anduin leaned against the wall and studied it attentively. The main part is the universal protection spell, which also includes anti-apparition, safeguard, shielding spell, crypto spell and other spells. It is quite comprehensive. If it were another wizard who had not studied spells, he would not be able to solve it. Anduin nodded in approval of this set of runes. But this was not a problem for him. Anduin took out his wand and tapped a few magic nodes on the magic pattern. The whole set of magic patterns quickly dimmed, and then the stone wall quickly turned and moved like the entrance of diagonally, revealing a small door more than 1 meter high. Anduin summoned a ball of light and controlled it to float into the dark doorway. A downward stone staircase appeared visible to the naked eye, but what was in the basement below could not be seen. Chapter 165 Safe House, asking for monthly ticket recommendation. Seeing this, he glanced at Karkaroot very cautiously, and then nodded at the doorway. The meaning was very simple, that is, you go ahead and clear the way. Karkaroot had a constipated expression on his face. Why is it that no matter which camp he is in, I have to do this kind of work of exploring the way and dying? Seeing that he did not respond for a long time, Anduin glared at him again. Karkaroot then reluctantly lowered his head and got into the doorway, and then moved down carefully step by step. Move quickly, isn't my light ball clearing the way for you? It's not like you can't see the road. Anduin scolded dissatisfiedly. Karkaroot was frightened by Anduin's voice and hurriedly quickened his pace. How is it? Is there any mechanism down there? Anduin asked loudly beside the small door. There is no danger at the moment, Master, it looks like an ordinary basement down there. Karkaroot's voice was transmitted with a faint echo. Anduin heard Karkaroot's tone and found that he was not nervous. He was relieved and went in and walked down the stairs. After entering the basement, Anduin summoned several balls of light to scatter around, illuminating the inside. Looking up, the entire basement is very large, about the same size as the first floor. Half of it is a warehouse without partitions, and the other side is a few rooms. The floor is made of very thick and flat large stones. There is an indescribable smell in the whole space, which is a dry and clean smell in the hospital after removing the alcohol smell. There are more than a dozen rows of shelves on this side of the warehouse. After a brief browse, Anduin found that they are all a pile of alcohol, drinks and easy-to-store food. He saw several T-bone hog hams, ordinary pork hams, sausages in bundles, rows of bacon, smoked meat, cheese, and even various canned foods. At the same time, there are many other daily necessities on some shelves, including boxes of candles, oil lamps, dry firewood, pots and pans, etc. Moreover, the basement was kept very dry and tidy. All these things looked like new and had not deteriorated at all. Wow, so many supplies, enough for one person to live for several years. These alone are a great harvest. Looking at the good things in this warehouse, Anduin was very excited, and then he immediately checked the rooms next to it. One of the rooms was the kitchen, which was equipped with a variety of equipment and even installed an air outlet to exhaust the smoke. Another room was the bathroom, which was also kept very clean and looked like no one had used it. The last room was the bedroom. Facing the entrance was a fireplace with a pile of firewood inside. The inner wall was very clean, without even any ash. It was obvious that it had never been used. On one side of the fireplace was a bed, and next to it stood several large wooden cabinets of uniform specifications. When the cabinet doors were opened, they were filled with sheets, quilts, and spare clothes. On the other side, there were several bookshelves placed against the wall. Most of them were empty, with only a dozen common books and some newspapers. In the middle of the bookshelf, there was a very large solid wood desk facing outward. It was filled with all kinds of stationery, including 2 large piles of parchment. Next to the desk, there was also a wine cabinet and a wine table. Of course, they were all empty now, but they looked very aristocratic. It seems that this basement is a safe house prepared by the Tivras family for themselves. As long as they hide in it, they can stay there for 3, 5 or 7 years. It's just like preparing for the end of the world. Anduin thought silently as he looked at everything here. After Anduin carefully searched the entire bedroom, he made a new discovery. There were many drawers and cabinets on the inside of the desk. After opening the door of one of the cabinets, he found a small safe inside. This safe was not like the password safes in the Muggle society. There was no password wheel or anything like that. There was only a handle on it, and the rest of the space was empty. Anduin placed his hand on the safe and carefully sensed it for a while. Sure enough, there was a weak fluctuation of magic power. It seemed that this was a magic safe. When he saw this thing, he naturally used the same trick again. He pulled out the hammer and started to smash it. After a while, the corresponding magic patterns appeared on it. Looking at the dense magic patterns on the safe, Anduin couldn't help but frown. The protective magic on it was much more complicated than the protective spell at the entrance. It could almost be regarded as a hodgepodge of protective spells, including explosion-proof, anti-toxic, waterproof, and anti-magic. It's not impossible to crack it completely, but there is obviously not enough time. Now there is only 1 hour left until dawn, and we have to find time to set up the scene. Looking at the safe, Anduin couldn't help but worry. But just when he was about to give up, he seemed to have discovered something. He carefully identified several details on the magic patterns, and then his eyes lit up. He got it. This is actually a safe that can be opened with blood. Only the owner of a specific bloodline can open it. If that's the case, then there is a way. Anduin stood up, took out a small syringe from his body, threw it to Karkaroff, and ordered, "Go forward and draw some blood from Torquil. You should know how to use this thing." "Yes, I know, Master." Karkaroff, who had been waiting quietly on the side, answered after taking the syringe. "I didn't know it at first, but after you used it on several of us, I still saw it." Karkaroff looked at the syringe in his hand and complained to himself. "Hurry up." Anduin hurriedly urged Karkaroff regardless of what he thought. "Yes, Master." Karkaroff, who was scolded, hurried upstairs, and the 4 people lying on the second floor were still unconscious. Some of them were unable to bear the mental stimulation, some fainted from pain, and some fainted from exhaustion after being tortured to exhaustion. Karkaroff looked at the miserable state of several people and could not bear to watch. He swallowed his saliva, drew a tube of blood and ran downstairs. After obtaining the blood sample, Anduin smeared some blood on the safe, then took out his wand and silently chanted a spell. After a while, the blood on the wall of the safe slowly seeped into the safe, and then with a click, the door of the safe opened. "Very good, I have learned blood magic for half a year, and I didn't expect that it can be used for unlocking in addition to assisting alchemy." Anduin muttered and gently opened the door of the safe. The safe is divided into 2 layers. The upper layer is very empty, with only a key and a piece of paper. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 166. Land Deed and Key. Asking for monthly ticket recommendation. On the lower level, a row of gold galleons were neatly stacked. Anduin took them out and counted them carefully. There were exactly 1,000 gold galleons. "Good fellow, I harvested 1,600 gold galleons tonight. It's a big harvest." Anduin put the gold coins into the space leather bag with a smile in his eyes. Then he took out the key and paper from the upper level and studied them. He put the key aside and took out the paper first to read it. As a result, he was immediately delighted. This was actually the title deed of Diagonally. And it was the kind of unsigned title deed officially certified by the Ministry of Magic. As long as you hold this title deed, the house and the land will be recognized by the Ministry of Magic. I didn't expect that the joke I made with Ms. Nell before would come true. This is simply a windfall. No wonder it has to be protected so strictly. It's actually an unsigned title deed. Anduin thought teasingly. This kind of unsigned title deed is very rare. He had only seen some records in some materials recording pure blood wizards before. In fact, most properties in the magic world do not use things like title deeds. After all, they are all wizards. They can find a place in the deep mountains and old forests, cast a few shielding spells, and if they want to be more secretive, they can even cast the Fidelis charm, or directly buy Muggle properties or manors in the Muggle world and modify them for use. However, some special areas, such as Diagonally and Hogsmeade, where wizards gather, are different. Each property in these areas has a clear record, and it must be registered in detail with the Ministry of Magic and issued a title deed before it can be owned. Unsigned title deeds are even more special. It takes very troublesome procedures to convert a normal title deed into such an unsigned title deed, and it must be signed by a senior official at the Ministry of Magic director level or above and a Wizengamot councillor to approve it. Therefore, there are very few properties in the magic world that use this title deed. Of course, it is also because its advantages and disadvantages are too obvious. Its advantage is that no official agency can find out the real owner of this land, that is, it does not need to be registered, it is very secretive, and it is officially protected by the Ministry of Magic. No one can enter without permission. Even in places like Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade, where there are strict property records, such rights can be enjoyed. I think it should be operated by Patriarch Travs, a member of the Wizengamot Council, and a safe house was specially built to prevent the family from losing power or being targeted by enemies one day, such as being wanted by the Ministry of Magic, so there is a place to hide, and it is not easy to be traced. This is the method second only to using the Fidelis charm, and compared to the complete concealment of the Fidelis charm, this kind of property focuses more on hiding the identity of the owner behind the scenes, and can also be used to protect public properties. More importantly, it is easy to buy and sell. In simple terms, it is easy to bribe and the transaction is secret. It is simply to transform the assets of a house into a piece of paper. It is estimated that if the people of the Order of the Phoenix use formal means, they are still not sure who this house belongs to. They can find it by tracking Yaxley. But the disadvantage of this kind of title deed is also very obvious, that is, it is too easy to transfer. For example, now that Anduin has it, it will naturally be transferred to him. Spreading out the title deed, Anduin transferred his magic power to his fingers and drew a line under the title deed. Then the magic pattern on the title deed flickered, and the magic circle on the title deed recorded his magic fluctuations. In this way, the delivery of the land was completed, which was very convenient. Although this unsigned title deed is highly confidential, it is too easy to change the owner. If it is stolen by someone by mistake, it will be very troublesome. It is better to take the time to go to the Ministry of Magic to convert this title deed into an exclusive title deed. After putting the title deed close to his body, Anduin made up his mind. After putting away the title deed, he turned his attention to the key. It was brass in color, small in shape, with 3 round holes on the handle, and it looked like it could only open a small lock. After he picked up the key and fiddled with it for a while, he didn't find anything special. There was no magic fluctuation on it, and the material was just ordinary parasol brass after identification. At a loss, Anduin tilted his head to look at Karkarouf, held up the key and showed it to him. Do you recognize this thing? This is. Karkarouf leaned his head closer to observe it carefully, and answered uncertainly, it looks a bit like the key to Gringotts' vault. Vault? Anduin's eyes lit up. Yes, that makes sense why that key is kept in such a secure safe. Yes, it looks like it. I had a similar one before. Karkarouf confirmed again. Then with this key, can we directly access the corresponding vault? Anduin asked quickly. That's not certain. Karkarouf shook his head. Why? Anduin frowned slightly. Master, you may not understand Gringotts' management of bank vaults. Their vaults have different security levels. Ordinary shallow vaults can be entered with a key, while some vaults require you to go there in person in addition to the key. If you don't have the key, you must provide a permit issued by the vault owner. The deeper vaults have higher security measures, and there are even no keys. Not only must you go there in person, but you also need the corresponding goblin administrator to touch it to open it. Karkarouf counted on his fingers and explained to Anduin one by one. I see, then just looking at the key can't determine what type of vault it corresponds to. Anduin sneered. Yes, this may only be known by Tavlat, but generally the vaults with keys are shallow vaults. With the power of the Travs family, it seems that they don't need vaults with such a low security level. They have family vaults in deeper layers, where only people of the corresponding bloodline can visit. Moreover, compared to Gringotts, Travs is more willing to keep things in his own treasure house. Those big families don't actually trust Gringotts completely. Karkarouf explained respectfully. Oh, isn't it known as the safest place in the wizarding world? Anduin raised his eyebrows. Gringotts may be safe, but goblins may not be. Many of those long-standing families have participated in the famous Goblin Rebellion War. They have never been able to maintain trust with goblins. After all, they were once enemies. Karkarouf said. Understood, let's go up. Anduin sorted out his thoughts after listening to the explanation and ordered. Yes, master. Karkarouf responded flatteringly. After leaving the basement, Anduin cast a spell on the wall again to close the doorway, and at the same time cast a layer of protective spell on it. After all, this place will be his territory in the future. Chapter 167 The Big Killer. He was going to upgrade the protective magic of the house. The security level of these Death Eaters was too low. Many places were not taken into account and there were a lot of loopholes. After dealing with the basement, the two returned to the second floor. The 4 Death Eaters were still unconscious at this time. It seemed that Anduin's experiment had tortured them. Anduin took out a bottle of potion from his waist bag and threw it to Karkaroff. "Go feed it to Torkel and wake him up." Karkaroff took the potion and nodded respectfully, then helped him up, and then roughly poured the potion into Torkel's mouth, as if venting his anger. Cough, cough. With violent coughing, Torkel gradually woke up. He only felt that his head was very painful, as if he had a terrible nightmare. He was caught by a young wizard who was still studying at Hogwarts and tortured him. Both his body and mind were devastated. Just when he thought he had woken up from his dream, he opened his eyes and saw the young face that looked like a demon. What was going on? Was I still dreaming? Or was everything that happened before real? Torkel's pupils kept shrinking, and his mind kept falling into self-doubt between dreams and reality. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before he went crazy. Anduin saw Torkel was in a daze after waking up, and he felt a little dissatisfied, so he put on brass knuckles and punched him twice. Ah! The pain brought Torkel back to reality. Seeing Anduin raising his hand to punch again, he begged for mercy. Don't hit me, please. Are you awake?" Anduin's slow and heavy voice reached Torkel's ears, and Torkel nodded repeatedly. "That's good. I woke you up to ask you something." Anduin took out the vault key and asked, "Do you recognize this?" Torkel looked at the key in Anduin's hand. His face changed drastically. He looked at the key and then at the other's face, and asked anxiously, "How did you find this?" Anduin smiled disdainfully. "Do you want to ask me how I opened the basement? Or do you want to ask me how I cracked the safe?" Hearing Anduin directly tell the secret of this house, Torkel's heart sank. How could it be possible? Those memories should have been protected by the mental protection spell. It's over, it's all over. He found this key. Doesn't it mean that the deed has also been? Torkel's body softened and he was about to fall down, but Karkaroff next to him reacted quickly and immediately supported him. "Answer the master's question quickly, be honest." Karkaroff's face changed quickly, and he shouted at Torkel. "Karkaroff, you betrayed too?" Torkel glanced at the bearded man beside him, anger overcoming fear for a moment, and said with a ferocious face, "Just wait, when the Dark Lord returns, you'll definitely die." Bang! Seeing that he still had the strength to speak harshly, Anduin went up and punched him in the face again, causing Torkel to burst into tears in pain. "Stop talking nonsense. I don't want to waste truth serum, and I don't have time to waste it on you. Tell me." Anduin took out a bottle of potion and asked impatiently, ready to use truth serum to interrogate him at any time. This punch dispersed Torkel's anger that had just been raised, and he replied timidly, "No, I'll tell you." Then Torkel swallowed his saliva. "That's the key to open a middle-level vault in Gringotts." "What's in the vault? Do you need identification?" Anduin continued to ask. "That vault doesn't belong to me. It's Yulia's private vault. She needs to be there in person with the key to open it. It's indispensable. The key is unique and cannot be reported lost. No proof documents are accepted." Inside, when he said this, Torkel looked a little unnatural, as if he had something to hide. But when he saw Anduin flick his thumb and open the bottle cap of the truth serum, as if he was ready to feed him the medicine at any time, he closed his eyes and shouted, "It's all account books." "Account books?" Anduin seemed to have thought of something, but continued to ask, "What account books?" "That's it, just some ordinary account books for business between families." Torkel didn't dare to look Anduin in the face. His eyes were erratic. After a night of torture, he became extremely fragile both physically and mentally. Coupled with the pressure Anduin brought him, he even had no energy to organize the lie. Anduin's mind flashed quickly, and he immediately had a guess. "It's your smuggling account book, right? Are there some account books of your secret transactions with high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic and other families? Maybe in addition to your own secret account books, there are more evidence of transactions with other families and high-ranking officials." Anduin reasoned and bluffed. "You, how did you know?" As soon as he said this, Torkel knew that he had been tricked, and then he shut his mouth tightly. "Hehe, I'm very curious, how dare you put these things in the vault of Gringotts? Could it be that?" Anduin's mind flashed, as if he thought of something again. "This key is also part of the transaction you were going to use." This time Torkel didn't dare to respond, but from his flickering eyes, Anduin once again confirmed that what he thought was right. "So who are you going to trade this key with?" Anduin stared at Torkel's eyes, and asked again word by word, another pure blood family. A member of the Whizzing Jamot. A high-ranking official of the Ministry of Magic. Oh, Millicent Barnold? But when Anduin said Millicent Barnold's name, Torkel's pupils trembled and shrank violently. At this time, Anduin's eyes were clear. I see, this is the greatest guarantee your family has prepared for yourself. On the one hand, these secrets can be used to threaten those families and high-ranking officials who have secret dealings with you. On the other hand, if your family faces a real crisis, this key is the best bargaining chip. It can be used to trade with those in power and seek political asylum. Am I right? Anduin's mouth slowly opened, and he laughed mockingly. And through Torkel's reaction, it was confirmed that his judgment was correct. It has to be said that these pure blood families with a long history are quite far-sighted and prepared for danger in times of peace. Not only do they build safe houses on this legal land where no one can investigate the origins, but they also hold this political weapon. Compared with the gangster strategy of running away after something happens, this is more like a decision that these nobles would make. Chapter 168 Value Maximization. So what you said to the others before about running away to Europe together was also a lie to them. With this thing, any leak of it can save your life. Maybe the reason you were able to be released on bail before was also related to these materials. Could it be that Lucius was able to get away with this easily in addition to political donations? It just so happens that he is also Julius' brother. Anduin suddenly realized. After listening to Anduin's series of analyses, Torquil felt a great shock in his heart. Now he dared not look at Anduin again. He could only force himself to keep an indifferent expression and turn his head away to hide his inner panic. Karkaroff, who was standing aside, was furious when he heard this. It turned out that you didn't plan to go into exile with us from the beginning, and you were going to stay here and continue to be our rich young master, right? It turns out that you have been lying to us all the time. You were the first one to betray us. This further strengthened his determination to switch sides. Torkel wanted to die now. Not only did he fall into the hands of the devil, but the secrets that the family relied on for survival were also dug out. Before yesterday, he was still a free noble of the Travs family. According to the original plan, if he could trick these Death Eaters into exile overseas, if the Dark Lord could really return in the future, he would be a hero who preserved the strength of the organization. If the Dark Lord really died, then these wandering Death Eaters could also become the family's overseas expansion in the future, and they could grab more power and wealth for him, and they would have to thank him. But now, not to mention whether he could escape Anduin's clutches, if these secrets were leaked out, he would be the sinner of the entire Travs family. But Anduin didn't care about the Travs family's mess. What he should consider now is how much benefit this key could bring to him. It was not reliable to embezzle a key. First of all, a key alone could not allow him to take out the things in the vault, and compared to the key, this secret was more valuable. Even if he could really take these black materials for himself, it would bring him great troubles, which would attract countless enemies. Compared with the Travs family, how could a Muggle-born wizard dare to threaten these high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic, Whizzing Jamok Councilors and pure blood families? But it was even more impossible to leak the news, because it would also attract the resentment of countless people, which would harm others and himself. He didn't want to perish with the Travs family. He hated trouble and would not take the initiative to find trouble. So handing the news and keys to Dumbledore or Millicent Barnold? This might be a good choice. With the style of the wise minister, he would definitely not be stingy with rewards, but at most he would give him a reward commensurate with his merits. Maybe he would give him another medal. Dumbledore might give him a special contribution award, or even a medal of the Order of Merlin. But what was the use of so many medals for him? That thing couldn't be eaten, and it had no research value. At once, Anduin thought of several plans to maximize the value of this key. Got it. Anduin's eyes sparkled, and then he looked at Torkel, who was listless and had completely lost the will to live. This plan is very feasible, and it can be coordinated with the action later, but you, Torkel, must be sacrificed. Anduin thought with a sneer. Anduin took out his pocket watch and took a look. Time was running out, and he had to act quickly. Then he took out another pill from his waist bag. It was very similar to the one he fed to Karkaroff, but it seemed a little different. He roughly opened Torkel's mouth and stuffed it into his mouth. Then Anduin looked at Karkaroff. You have to cooperate with me in the play later. Come closer. Anduin murmured something in Karkaroff's ear, but Karkaroff immediately looked embarrassed after hearing it, and hurriedly said, Master, in this case, Won't I also be arrested by the Ministry of Magic? Why are you panicking? Anduin frowned dissatisfiedly. If you do as I say, will they let you go, or are you still reluctant to let these Death Eaters go because of your old friendship with them? No, no, no. Karkaroff shook his head and denied it repeatedly. I have no feelings for them at all, but, is this really reliable? If they interrogate these Death Eaters, wouldn't it be, except for Torkel, whose brain is protected by a protective spell, I have modified the short-term memory of several other people. There is no problem in dealing with interrogation. As for Torkel, I have the handle on their family. Do you think he dares to say it? Besides, even if he says something, will anyone believe it? Anduin sneered. Then Anduin ignored Karkaroff's tangled emotions and calmly gave orders to put away all the on-site test equipment and materials. He also arranged for Karkaroff to clean the second floor from inside to outside. After a night of tossing and turning, the entire second floor hall was covered with stains mixed with blood, sweat and urine, which smelled disgusting, but Karkaroff still completed the task very honestly. At the same time, he had to deal with the injuries and stains on the Death Eaters. At this time, Anduin used the healing spell instead of the Return My Pretty Fist because he was afraid that if he continued to fight, he would really beat them crazy. It took more than 10 minutes, and several Death Eaters, including Karkaroff, were dealt with cleanly, and even the holes in their clothes that were inserted by the measuring instrument were repaired. This was also that time he and Shunfing agreed on. Finally, Anduin used the spirit-binding snake to extract about half of the magic power from the Death Eaters, and cast the disillusionment spell on the Death Eaters and himself, and then took them out of the house through the window. In the morning, in the office of the Auror headquarters of the British Ministry of Magic, Alastair Moody yawned and dressed neatly, ready to start a day's work. He didn't know which lucky dark wizard would be hit by his killing curse today. As the oldest Auror in the Ministry of Magic, he was a well-known workaholic. He didn't go home all year round and it was normal for him to live directly in the office. In addition, after the vigorous and resolute Minister Millicent Barnold took office, he was given huge authority to use many methods that were not allowed before to deal with those Death Eaters and Dark Wizards, which made him love his job even more. After eating a few bites of dry bread to fill his stomach, Moody prepared to go to the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes to check the briefing. Those on-duty Ministry of Magic staff probably slept in again. Because of their negligence, there were always many magic monitoring signals above level XXX that were missed. Chapter 169 XXXX level incident. Just as he opened the door of his office, an owl flew in, and then a letter fell accurately into his hands. Owl. Didn't the Ministry of Magic start using paper airplanes to deliver letters some time ago? With some confusion, Moody opened the brown envelope, took out the letter and read it. After just 2 glances, Moody's expression became serious. Then Moody dragged his artificial leg and still came to the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes at a very fast speed. He kicked open the door of the office. The staff on duty who were napping inside were startled. They hurriedly looked at the door and found that it was Moody with a serious expression. What's wrong, Mr. Moody? For this senior Auror, not to mention the Death Eaters, even his own people were very afraid of him. Hurry up and check if there was any high-energy magic fluctuation in Regent's Park in London before. Moody shouted to the staff on duty in a very aggressive tone. The staff on duty trembled all over after being yelled at, and then immediately looked through the monitoring records. Yes, not long ago. The duty officer was a little nervous after seeing the record on the briefing. It turned out to be, it was a XXXX level magic fluctuation. Why didn't you report it? Are you lazy again? I must hold your boss accountable this time. Moody stomped his cane and cursed. After listening to the briefing, Moody immediately confirmed the authenticity of the content of the letter. The duty staff had a bitter face and was about to explain something, but Moody immediately ordered loudly. Immediately notify all Aurors to return to the team immediately, and notify the Striker team members to go directly to Regent's Park in London, and call all the duty personnel of the Reversal of Accidental Magic Events team to go to Regent's Park quickly, now. After saying that, Moody rushed to the entrance of the Ministry of Magic. It was more troublesome that he could not use apparition inside the Ministry of Magic. The staff in the office of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters also knew that something big had happened at this time, and they hurriedly took action. After a while, dozens of paper airplanes flew out of the office. As soon as Moody walked out of the Ministry of Magic, he quickly apparated away from the original place. In Regent's Park, not far from Diagon Alley, it was still very quiet. There were no muggles here in the early morning. But if you look closely, you'll see that there are several pits of different sizes in an open space in the park woods. The trees are either burnt or fallen. The surrounding area is a mess. Obviously, a large-scale fierce battle has just taken place here. Moody, who just appeared through apparition, saw such a scene and quickly made such a judgment. Moreover, the intensity of the battle may exceed his imagination. He can see many traces of powerful spells used with his naked eyes, such as Thunder Explosion, Repel Spell, Freezing Spell, Cut Spell and Flame, which are very conspicuous. Moody took out his wand and carefully explored the park woods. His left magic eye seemed to have discovered something. Looking at the location of a certain open space next to him, he tentatively called out, "Anduin." "It's me, Mr. Moody." As soon as the voice fell, the space in the open space squirmed and a black-haired boy walked out. The boy looked very embarrassed now. His clothes, face, and hair were covered with dust and blood. At the same time, his right hand was pressed tightly on his left arm, and he looked like he was seriously injured. He walked towards Moody very weakly. Moody hurried forward and took out a bottle of potion from his arms. He gently supported Anduin's back and slowly poured the potion into his mouth. Anduin coughed twice. "Drink slowly, kid. The rescuers will be here soon. Drink some tonic first. Are you okay? Are you seriously injured?" Moody, who was usually fierce, said to Anduin in a gentle tone. After drinking the potion, Anduin's slightly pale face gradually recovered some color. "It's okay, I just suffered some minor injuries, but my magic power was over-consumed and I was a little tired," Anduin said with a slightly tired face. He was not lying about being tired. After all, he had not slept all night. "Where are the Death Eaters who attacked you?" Seeing that Anduin was in good condition, Moody asked about the whereabouts of the attackers. "After I knocked them down in the previous attack, I hid them with a shielding spell for fear of being seen by muggles. I will remove the spell now." After saying that, Anduin took out his wand and pointed at the empty space behind him. 5 figures appeared on the empty space. They were Torkel and others. Even Karkaroff was among them, looking unconscious. Moody had noticed the abnormality through his magic eye before, and guessed in his heart that Anduin had cast a spell to hide himself, so he asked, but he didn't expect that these Death Eaters were also hidden by him. "This is Torkel Travs. There are also Goyle, Cragday, and Karkaroff who were on the run. This young man is Yaxley, whom Dumbledore reminded me to pay attention to before. I didn't expect them to be all here." Moody quickly stepped forward to check the status of several people and found that they had been knocked unconscious by the stunning curse. At this time, he looked at Anduin in surprise and asked curiously, "In the letter you sent me before, it only mentioned that you were attacked by Death Eaters. How come they all fainted? Did you do it?" "Yes, these Death Eaters are really hard to deal with," Anduin said with a look of surviving a disaster. "What's going on? I still don't understand it. Why did they find you? And why did you appear here so early in the morning? And why did an owl just happen to let you notify me as soon as something happened?" Moody asked with a puzzled look on his face. It's not that he doubted Anduin, but this incident happened too suddenly, and there are many details that can't be explained. He urgently needs to know the answer now. "It's like this." Then Anduin repeated the cause and process of the incident to Moody. "I came to Diagon Alley yesterday. I wanted to buy some gifts for Augusta and Neville, but I happened to see Tom, the owner of the Leaky Cauldron, whom I hadn't seen for a long time. You should know him. Well, I remember that you seem to have lived there for a long time before entering Hogwarts." Moody thought for a moment and replied, "Yes, he and I are old friends. Since we haven't seen each other for a long time, I planned to stay at his place for one night and catch up with him. So I sent a letter to Augusta to inform her. When she replied, my owl came. I didn't let my owl go back. That night, Tom, my owl, and Shunfin had dinner at the Leaky Cauldron. Many people saw it." Anduin, Chapter 170. You're too kind. I have the habit of doing morning exercises for many years. There happened to be a park near Diagon Alley, so I came here to do some exercises in the early morning and to let my owl out for a walk," Anduin said. "And then you met the Death Eaters. Why did they keep staring at you?" Moody was a little confused as to why several Death Eaters came to attack a little wizard so early in the morning. "Yes, but when I came to Regent's Park and was about to warm up, I found myself surrounded by Death Eaters. As for why the Death Eaters attacked me," Anduin pondered for a moment. "In Hogwarts, I had friction with Yaxley and Travs's sample, and I was the only Muggle-born wizard in Slytherin. They all hated me to the core. I think it was for this reason, so, that doesn't make sense. If it was just a friction between students, would it be necessary to gather 5 Death Eaters to attack you? And looking at the extent of the damage around, it's obvious that they want to kill you. Moody frowned. Are the students in the school so angry now? He looked at Anduin in confusion. When Anduin saw Moody asking this, he pursed his lips hesitantly, and finally gritted his teeth, as if he had made some important decision, and looked at Moody intently. In fact, they have caused trouble for me more than once in the academy. Although I sent them away every time, they still hold a grudge against me. Just before Christmas, Yaxley gathered some pure blood wizards and tried to attack me outside the school, but I managed to escape, and Anduin looked at Moody seriously and said, in that attack, Yaxley tried to use the killing curse on me. What? Moody's face suddenly became fierce, and he looked at Anduin seriously. Are you sure? Yes, Headmaster Dumbledore should know about what happened that day, or he should have some suspicions. After that Christmas, Yaxley has not appeared in Hogwarts. Anduin sighed, and he pushed Dumbledore out to block the bullet. From Moody's previous reaction, he could tell that the other people in the Order of the Phoenix should not know about Yaxley's criminal record. So that's how it is. Now everything fits together. I was wondering why Dumbledore suddenly asked us to look for Yaxley and wasted manpower to monitor the house where no information could be found. If they were really hiding in that house, they might have discovered you who came to Diagon Alley. Moody suddenly showed a look of sudden enlightenment, but then he looked at Anduin sternly. Why didn't you inform us about this earlier? Letting an unscrupulous Death Eater wander around like this, do you know how much trouble it would cause? Sorry, it's my fault. Yaxley, after all, he is my senior, the head of Slytherin. I really can't bear it. Anduin showed a regretful expression and apologized sincerely. Humph, you are too kind. You must not hesitate in the face of these bastards. Look, what you get after letting him run away is deep hatred and endless attacks. Moody looked at Anduin's melancholy look and scolded him with regret. It was a batch of high-quality experimental materials, a large fortune, a house, and of course, listening to Moody's words, Anduin's mind was actually a little off-topic, and he quickly gathered his mind, still keeping a frightened expression on his face. After Moody scolded the Death Eaters a few more times, he saw the young Anduin lowering his head and listening to him humbly, which made him feel that he had gone too far. Anduin was still a child, and he had just fought a desperate battle with 5 Death Eaters alone. Thinking of this, Moody suddenly became curious again. You just said that you were surrounded by these 5 Death Eaters before, then how did you knock them all down? These guys are not easy to deal with. They are a group of vicious criminals. This is all thanks to the teachings of Professor Flitwick and Professor Bones, plus a little bit of luck. Anduin took a deep breath with lingering fear, and explained to Moody, they were lurking in the woods at the time, thanks to my elves' good night vision and our long-term tacit understanding. They discovered clues in the sky and warned me in advance, otherwise I would have been in danger. After Tailwind warned me, I immediately used the Echo Charm to sense the other party's position. The Echo Charm is a new spell that Professor Bones and I developed together when he was in office. Well, I've read your thesis, and Edgar also showed off his monocle to us at the Order of the Phoenix meeting. Moody seemed to recall Bones's mean face and curled his lips, then asked curiously, and then what? After discovering the enemy, I knew I had to take the initiative first, because time was not on my side, so I cast an illusion charm on myself first, and released the dazzling spell at the same time. The sun hadn't come out yet, and it was still dark around. The sudden strong light interfered with their vision. Dazzling spell? What's that? Moody asked, puzzled. Anduin took off a button from his body and said, I'll show you once and you'll understand. Then Anduin put magic power into the button and threw it into the air with all his strength. Then suddenly a strong light flashed. Even though it was already bright outside, Moody was dazzled and lost his mind for a moment. He couldn't help but exclaimed, is this the alchemical prop you made? Yes, it's an optimized spell I developed after improving the fluorescent runes. Anduin paused, and continued. The effect was better then than it is now. Those Death Eaters didn't expect me to attack in advance and were affected by the strong light for several seconds. I took advantage of this to almost break out of the encirclement, knock down Yaxley with a spell, and used him as a shield to resist the attacks of the rest of the people. Well done, quick reaction and reasonable strategy. Moody exclaimed, and then motioned for Anduin to continue. After they regained their sight, they attacked me, not caring about the life and death of Yaxley who was standing in front of me. He was hit by several of his own spells. Seeing that holding hostages was useless, I threw Yaxley at one person with the levitation spell, and then used the low ground spell technique to sneak attack and knock down another person, the fat man. Anduin pointed at one of the Death Eaters and said, "The reason why Yaxley was used as a shield was mainly because he was tortured so badly that he even had mental problems. If someone asked about it, it would be easy to blame it on the attack of his accomplices." Chapter 171 Advertising, asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets at the end of the month. The main reason why Yaxley was used as a shield was that he was tortured too badly, and even had problems with his mental state. If he really went crazy, he could just blame it on his accomplices' attacks. That's crap, eh? This kid is uneducated and useless. He has grown so much weight in vain. But you did a great job, and you even know how to use the ground lowering spell. This technique is the most challenging in Finkley's spellcasting skills. Moody listened with great interest, and was also very impressed by Anduin's on-the-spot reaction and skills. Anduin nodded modestly and continued, "You are flattering me. After knocking down 2 people, I quickly used mist and clouds to try to disrupt their vision, but the remaining 3 reacted very quickly. One of them immediately used the hurricane spell to blow away the mist, and the other 2 continued to use powerful explosion spells and fire spells to attack me." Anduin pointed in the direction for Moody, and there were indeed many large pits bombarded by spells there. "Then how did you solve it?" Moody recalled the scene in his mind. Standing in Anduin's position at the time was extremely dangerous, and he couldn't help but get nervous. "Thanks to my phased boots and protection ring." Anduin showed Moody his ring and shoes. At the time, with the help of the echo spell, I was able to detect that the other party was casting a spell on me, so I immediately activated the acceleration function of the prop shoes to move to one side, and at the same time used the protection ring to support the armor spell to block the aftermath of the explosion. I also took advantage of the chaos to approach a Death Eater and cast a spell at close range to knock him down. Anduin pointed at Karkaroot and activated the protection ring. A shield-like arc-shaped protective shield unfolded from the ring on his left hand, almost protecting most of him. "I can't tell, Anduin, you have so many things." Moody smiled and praised. "You're flattering me." Anduin smiled shyly, and continued, "At the time, there were only 2 people left, but their attacks became more and more reckless, and they even used the unforgivable curse on me many times. Fortunately, I used the flexibility of my phased boots to dodge them many times." Anduin did tell some truth about the unforgivable curse. When he was setting up the scene, he ordered Karkaroot to use the wands of the other people to cast various spells, including many unforgivable curses, which could withstand the inspection of the flashback curse. "Then how did you deal with those 2 people in the end?" Moody asked curiously. "That was thanks to the sonic boom spell. I relied on it to stun the 2 people instantly, and then I was able to defeat them one by one and knock them down. You know what happened next? I immediately sent an owl to send you a message to notify you to come quickly." Anduin took off another button from his body and said, "More? Do you have an arsenal? Why do you have so many magic props for battle?" Moody took the talisman from Anduin, injected some magic power into it, and threw it far away. The sudden burst of infrasound made his head dizzy, and it took him a long time to wake up. Seeing Moody's embarrassed look, Anduin smiled and explained, "Since I learned alchemy from Professor Bones, I have deeply fallen in love with this art, so I have been obsessed with making alchemy props. Maybe I will open an alchemy store in the future. These props may be the future flagship products. How about it, do you like it?" It turned out that Anduin had been talking nonsense with Moody for so long, explaining the details of the battle and demonstrating the alchemy props, all of which were advertising in advance. He had just acquired a house in Diagon Alley, and it would be a waste if he didn't use it, so he took great pains to show Moody the products, which was considered to be paving the way for the alchemy business in the future. "I like these little props. They are much more practical than a peepscope. When you are going to sell these props, remember to tell me in advance. I will definitely pre-order them." Moody was really dazzled by Anduin's series of alchemical props and said with great interest, "Don't worry. I will definitely give you a trial copy when the time comes." And, Anduin looked at him with a smile, "I'm developing a new prop recently. It is currently called magic handcuffs. When you put them on, they will continuously extract the prisoner's magic power. When you catch a dark wizard, put them on him and he will be unable to escape." "Really?" When Moody heard about this good thing, he was already very interested and immediately started a heated discussion with Anduin. Then Anduin learned from Moody about all aspects of the daily work and tasks of the Aurors and the Ministry of Magic staff. Most of them were Moody's constant complaints about the various problems encountered by the Aurors during their tasks, such as always being a step behind when arriving at the scene of the accident, lack of means to track dark wizards, always having communication errors during attacks and arrests, or lack of investigation means, etc. From the narration of a senior Auror, he could understand the troubles these combat wizards faced in their daily work. This actually opened up a lot of ideas for Anduin to develop alchemical props in the future, at least determining the research direction and goal. However, just as the two were chatting happily, there was a constant buzzing sound of air explosions around them. It was the apparition. It seemed that the people from the Ministry of Magic had arrived. The strikers who arrived at the scene one after another only knew that Moody hurriedly asked them to come over, and did not know the specific mission. They even thought that they were coming to support. In addition, after the appearance, what they saw was a scorched earth bombed by the spell, so they raised their wands and pointed at Anduin who was standing there. The tips of the wands also accumulated magic power, ready to fight at any time. "What are you doing? Put down your wands. Do you know who you are pointing at? This is a hero who defeated 5 Death Eaters." Moody, who was interrupted by the late strikers, changed his face instantly and roared at the strikers with a fierce look on his face. As soon as the strikers landed, they were scolded by their boss. They looked at each other in dismay, and then put down their wands in embarrassment. The strikers came forward and saw that there were indeed 5 unconscious Death Eaters. One of the strikers looked at Anduin, then at the Death Eaters lying on the ground, and asked in disbelief, "Captain Moody, are you saying that these Death Eaters were all killed by this child? How is this possible? I can testify to this. I already know all the details of the battle between Anduin and the Death Eaters here. You don't need to question this." Moody shouted again. Chapter 172. Ministry of Magic. After listening to Anduin's retelling of the battle, Moody no longer had any doubts that Anduin could defeat these Death Eaters. On the contrary, he was more interested in Anduin's excellent equipment. After scolding these men, Moody said, "What are you still doing now? Hurry up and take care of the prisoners and seal off the scene. Don't you see that this place is a mess? Immediately set up Muggle-repelling spells and shielding spells to block the surrounding area and wait for the reversal of accidental magic events team to come and deal with it." Many strikers were just called out from their beds. After arriving at the scene, they didn't understand the situation for a while. Now they were awakened instantly by Moody's shouting. They cast spells outside the scene in a well-trained manner. Soon, a barrier composed of a layer of repelling spells and shielding spells wrapped the place. In terms of fighting will and professionalism, these strikers are still quite reliable. Anduin looked at everyone busy at the side and had a basic judgment of them in his heart. "Anduin, I'll take you to the hospital for injuries first. After all, you just went through a big battle. It's better to go for a checkup. You also need to rest. Don't worry, we will cover the medical expenses." After Moody yelled at his men, he said to Anduin with a ferocious expression and a gentle tone, "No matter what, Moody is always several blocks ahead of others in scaring people." Anduin controlled his emotions and nodded his head and said, "It's okay, Moody. I know my current situation very well. Have you forgotten that I can do alchemy? I also have a set of props for self-examination." Then he took out a pocket watch, turned to the back of the dial, and gently pressed a switch. A cover on the back opened, showing 490 fan-shaped pictures divided by a cross. Each picture shows 4 colors of red, yellow, blue and green, and there are many ring scales on it from the inside to the outside. A full red bar indicates no blood loss and intact muscles, a full yellow bar indicates no bone damage, a full blue bar indicates normal body temperature and no dehydration, and a full green bar indicates no symptoms of poisoning. Anduin explained in detail to Moody. "My God, how many good things can you get out of your body? Will you sell this thing in the future?" Moody now looked at Anduin with a new look and said with great emotion, "This prop is actually not stable. A shielding spell or a confusion spell can deceive it. I just made it for fun. If there is a market, I don't mind mass producing and selling it." Anduin shrugged. "Haha, if you want to sell it, remember to leave one for me. I always can't figure out if I have lost another bone in my body." Moody said a scary joke. After a while, wizards from the reversal of accidental magic events team also arrived one after another. After understanding the situation of the scene, these wizards couldn't help but look at Anduin a few more times. After all, it is not common to arrest 5 Death Eaters at one time. Then the wizards quickly took over the scene. Those responsible for restoring the site restored the site, and those responsible for amnesia began to search for the muggles who caused the accident. After the strikers handed over the scene, they gathered around Moody again. Since you don't want to go to the hospital, then come back to the Ministry of Magic with me. We will also take notes of what happened and compile a report. Besides, you have made a great contribution this time. Minister Barnold may also want to see you. Seeing that the scene had been handed over, Moody prepared to take the prisoner back to the Ministry of Magic, and proposed to Anduin at the same time. Yeah. Anduin responded and seemed to think of something. He took out the wand he had confiscated in advance and handed it to Moody. At the same time, he leaned close to Moody's ear and whispered a few words, and then pointed to Talker lying on the ground. Moody raised his eyebrows after hearing what Anduin said, then his eyes turned and he smiled. That makes sense. Don't worry, I will keep a close eye on this guy and make sure they won't find a chance to contact him. This time we finally have a chance to catch the Travs family in one fell swoop. Okay, pack up. You guys will be responsible for escorting the prisoner back to the Ministry of Magic and put him in solitary confinement. No one is allowed to visit without my order, including the ministers of each department. Moody calmly directed everyone on the scene, and then turned his head to look at Anduin. You hold me, let's go back to the Ministry of Magic. As you wish. Anduin smiled and held Moody's shoulders, then he and Moody and a group of strikers apparated and disappeared from the scene. Anduin felt his vision turn, and what appeared in front of him was a long and magnificent hall, with a polished dark wooden floor on the ground, and peacock blue ceiling inlaid with glittering golden symbols. These symbols kept moving and changing, like a huge high-altitude bulletin board, and many gilded fireplaces were embedded on both sides of the hall. In the center of the hall was a fountain with a group of pure gold statues, including wizards and witches, centaurs, goblins and house elves, with water jets gushing out from different parts of the statues. At this time, because of Moody's notice, many Ministry of Magic employees came out from the fireplace on the left one after another. The appearance of Anduin and a group of strikers instantly attracted their attention, especially when they saw the Death Eaters on the rack. They couldn't help but let out a burst of exclamations. The strikers in charge of detention had indifferent faces and looked forward, as if ignoring the admiration of the onlookers, but their chests and slightly raised chins revealed the pride in their hearts at this time, making these guys seem to have caught these prisoners as if they were caught by them. Hurry up, why are you pretending? What does the arrest of these Death Eaters have to do with you? Moody was very disrespectful and drove the strikers away angrily. After being yelled at by him, the strikers couldn't help but lower their heads in embarrassment, and then they didn't dare to delay and quickly dragged the Death Eaters forward. The wizards nearby became even more curious when they saw this scene. 5 Death Eaters were arrested. This was a big deal. It was not done by the strikers. Who could it be? Could it be Moody? The wizards watching were excitedly whispering to each other and kept peeking in the crowd. Many people also noticed Anduin, who was out of place, but no one suspected him. After Moody scolded the strikers, he turned around and explained the Ministry of Magic to Anduin. This should be your first time to the Ministry of Magic. This is the reception hall of the Ministry of Magic. After passing the security check counter in front, you can't use apparition, so we have to walk the rest of the way. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 173 Big Trouble. Hearing this, Anduin smiled and nodded, and looked around curiously. Then he noticed that several wizards kept spying on the captured Death Eaters, and then their faces changed drastically as if they had discovered something, and then they went into the fireplace on the right side of the hall and quietly left the scene. Anduin smiled coldly when he saw this scene. Did you find it? If you have, take action quickly, don't make me wait too long. Moody on the side did not notice Anduin's expression. He led him into the elevator and then introduced the Ministry of Magic to him with great interest. We are now on the 8th floor underground. Each floor above is a department. The floors above are the Department of Magical Games and Sports on the 7th floor, the Department of Magical Transportation on the 6th floor, the Department of International Magical Cooperation on the 5th floor, the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures on the 4th floor, the Department of Magical Incidents and Catastrophes on the 3rd floor, and our destination, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement on the 2nd floor. If you really plan to do business in alchemical props in the future, remember to get a certificate from the Department of International Magical Cooperation in advance. All buying and selling businesses in the wizarding world must abide by the standard code of international magical trade. Otherwise, it will be considered smuggling. Do you understand? Moody reminded kindly. I see. Anduin nodded in response, and then asked curiously, why are the requirements for doing business in the wizarding world so complicated? In fact, it's okay if the business partner is domestic, but cross-border business is more troublesome. This is mainly to protect the interests of wizards in various countries. The rules of the Ministry of Magic in each country are different. Some places are not so strict, but who makes the UK too close to the European continent? If you are not careful, it is easy to be impacted by overseas products. Just like magic carpets, it is the most important flying equipment in many countries. It has become popular in our country some time ago, but in order to protect our local flying broom industry, the sale of magic carpets is strictly controlled. You probably won't see that thing in a while. So that's it. Are they afraid that the trade deficit will cause the loss of state-owned assets? However, the British Ministry of Magic seems to use a one-size-fits-all policy and directly prohibits it. Usually, he rarely sees foreign magic products being sold in the country. Will there be a lot of smuggling? Anduin suddenly thought of something and asked curiously. There are more than a lot of them. Our Aurore's main task was to cooperate with the Department for International Magical Cooperation and the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures to combat smuggling. In the past, a large number of magical materials and magical animals were smuggled abroad, and of course, many were smuggled into the country. Moody curled his lips in anger. Many of these businesses involved pure blood families, but unfortunately, the ones we caught were just some random people. Those big families did a great job of keeping secrets, so it was difficult to collect evidence. Oh? It seemed that the value of the key in his hand might be greater than he thought. Anduin then asked Moody for a lot of relevant information in a roundabout way. It happened that Moody was in a good mood at the time and had a good impression of Anduin, so he shared a lot of inside information with him. After taking the elevator to the second underground floor, Moody first took him to a room that looked like a lounge and asked him to rest here for a while. Moody had to imprison the Death Eaters first. Due to Anduin's prior reminder, Moody knew the value of these prisoners, especially Torquil. He had escaped the crime because of his brother, a member of the Whizzing Jamot, but now he was caught red-handed. His identity as a Death Eater was already irrefutable. His brother had vouched for him. Now that the truth was revealed, it would be a huge scandal, which would inevitably destroy the prestige of the Travs family and even threaten Torquil's brother's position as a member of the Parliament. In other words, with Torquil, Minister Barnold would have the opportunity to kick the Travs family out of the Whizzing Jamot, and those guys who were closely related to the Travs family would also be restrained. In this way, the policy of eliminating Death Eaters led by Minister Barnold could be further advanced. Moody had made plans and was ready to personally watch over and protect Torquil. He was a treasure now. Those guys might secretly kill him when they saw that the situation was not good. He was not at ease to hand him over to others. No one knew whether there were still Death Eaters lurking in the Ministry of Magic or accomplices of the Travs family. Rest well here. You must be exhausted. I will remind them not to disturb you. Relax and have a good sleep. Tell them if you need anything. There is food in the cabinet if you are hungry or thirsty. You can come to the Aurore headquarters to find me when you are in better spirits. I will take you to see Minister Barnold later. As a war hero, Anduin should have been received immediately. However, it was still early and most of the Ministry of Magic employees were not at work. Moody saw that Anduin was not in a good spirit. He was probably overexhausted by the previous battle, so he arranged him in the VIP lounge. At the same time, Moody was busy dealing with the Death Eaters. He didn't dare to let them out of his sight. Okay, I will find you if there is anything. Don't worry. Anduin smiled. After Moody left, Anduin finally couldn't help stretching. The intensive experiments this night made him exhausted. But it's not time to rest yet. He took out his pocket watch and looked at the time, then smiled coldly. There will be other distinguished guests coming later, but you don't have much time left, so you must seize it. Then Anduin used a spell to tidy up his appearance, walked to the cabinet next to him, poured himself a drink, and added some ice cubes, then sat leisurely on the sofa without saying a word, as if he was waiting for someone. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Anduin had refilled his drink, there was a knock on the door of the VIP room. You came quite quickly, less than half an hour. Anduin pursed his lips and answered loudly, "Come in." After getting permission, a woman in pink work clothes walked into the lounge and looked at him with a smile that made Anduin look very hypocritical. I guess you are Mr. Anduin Wilson. I'm Dolores Umbridge, Senior Secretary of the Wizengamot Council. It's nice to meet you. Umbridge seemed very proud of her identity, and she couldn't help but raise her tone when introducing herself. Nice to meet you. Anduin didn't even stand up. He took a sip of his drink and smiled. Oh, Anduin, you don't mind me calling you that, do you? Umbridge was a little dissatisfied with Anduin's rudeness, but still smiled. Anduin raised his eyebrows without comment and didn't answer. Anduin, I came here to tell you that you are in big trouble. Chapter 174 Lobbyist, asking for monthly ticket recommendation ticket. Umbridge's expression changed rapidly. At first, she was still smiling, but in an instant, she became serious and sharp, and then stared straight at Anduin, as if she wanted to find some tension and fear from his face. But Anduin obviously didn't give her this opportunity. He still acted indifferent, gently put down the glass in his hand, and responded lightly. Oh? Yes. Umbridge walked to the sofa opposite Anduin and sat down directly, raised her chin and said seriously. Early this morning, that is, 2 hours ago, you had a fight with someone in Regent's Park, 2 miles away from Diagon Alley. Am I right? So? Anduin was a little curious about what Umbridge would say. No, so. Don't you know that you have caused big trouble? You have seriously violated the statute of secrecy. The Reasonable Restraint of Underage Wizards Act has strict regulations and prohibits underage wizards from using magic outside of school. Umbridge threatened Anduin arrogantly. Anduin raised his eyebrows. Did this idiot really treat him as a child? Or was he bullying him because he didn't know the statute of secrecy? He actually used such a low-level method to scare people. Was he going to say that if he wanted to settle it, he had to cooperate with her or something? Umbridge didn't know what Anduin was thinking, and said to herself, you know that the law strictly stipulates that intentional and knowing use of magic in Muggle-inhabited areas is a crime. You are no longer simply casting spells outside of school for no reason. You are suspected of intentionally using dangerous spells, which is a felony. Did they delete the sentence casting spells in front of Muggles? What a poor acting. Why would they send such a person to be a lobbyist? Anduin's thoughts gradually drifted away. At this time, Umbridge stared at Anduin with sharp eyes, and performed a half-threatening and half-comforting performance. Your situation is not easy to deal with. If you are found guilty by the Wizengamot, you will be imprisoned in Azkaban. But you are lucky to have met me. With my help, you will be able to get through this difficult time smoothly. As long as you don't admit that those people attacked you, I can plead with them for you and say that you are not among the casters today. In this way, you don't have to, Poochie. Anduin held back for a long time, but still couldn't help laughing out loud, mainly because the aunt's performance was too funny. Umbridge was furious when she saw Anduin laughing so recklessly. She stood up angrily with a ferocious expression, like a sarcastic shrew. She shouted in a sharp voice, Mr. Wilson, I came here with good intentions to help you solve your troubles. I didn't expect you to be so ungrateful. Ha ha. Anduin sneered, then pushed aside his coat, revealing the Medal of Bravery on his chest. I think you are the one who is ungrateful. You actually came here to try to trick a person who once assisted the Ministry of Magic in capturing Death Eaters and was awarded the Silver Medal of Bravery. Casting spells outside school? Believe it or not, I will cast a spell in front of you right now and beat you up, and Minister Barnold will still reward me. Then Anduin stood up with a bang, staring at Umbridge with a cruel look, his whole body full of magic power, squeezing the furniture in the room and making a creaking sound. Umbridge felt that she was wrapped by a huge force, which made her breathless. She was immediately nervous. Why didn't this guy play by the rules? He just started fighting. But she still screamed stubbornly, how dare you fight against the Ministry of Magic officials? Anduin completely ignored the other party's shouting. With his powerful magic, he gently lifted Umbridge, who was trying to struggle, and sent her in front of him. Then he smiled and said, Ms. Umbridge, I don't want to waste any more time. Tell Yulia that if you give me 100,000 gold galleons, I will no longer pursue the rude behavior of the Travs family, and I can also help her settle this matter. Umbridge's face changed drastically when she heard Anduin's words. She was surprised and angry at times. How did he know that this was related to the Travs family? How sure was she sent by Yulia? And he dared to ask for a price of 100,000 directly. Anduin ignored Umbridge's rich facial expressions and continued, or you can ask her to try other methods, such as secretly killing Torquil to silence him. Oh, maybe she has already tried it. I guess you must have found that you can't get past Moody's guards, so you came to me. After saying this, he threw Umbridge forward and threw her heavily to the ground, then sat down slowly and continued to taste the drink in the cup leisurely. Oh, by the way. Anduin took a sip of the cold drink and sneered, remember to remind her that the key is with me. Umbridge struggled to get up from the ground, glared at Anduin with resentment, and then rolled and crawled out of the room. After sending Umbridge away, Anduin sat back on the sofa and closed his eyes to rest, but this time he didn't have to wait too long, and the door was knocked again soon. Then an elegant woman came in, with long light blonde hair, well maintained, and she didn't look like a mother at all. After hearing what Umbridge had told her, Yulia was shocked. Key? What key did he mean? It was impossible for the key to be hidden so secretly, and it didn't match the place where the incident happened. She originally thought that her brother-in-law really went to attack Anduin, but ended up getting himself into trouble. It was basically impossible to help him get away with it now. If he was arrested on the spot, a slight mishandling would even shake the status of the entire family. In fact, after discovering that Torquil had been arrested, Yulia, who felt overwhelmed, was thinking about how to solve this crisis. Torquil knew many of the family's core secrets. Fortunately, she had cast a mental protection spell on him before, so it should be no problem. However, the fact that the Travs family had been secretly supporting the Dark Lord was not sealed, so the most important thing at the moment was to contact Torquil and put pressure on the Aurors not to let them use the truth serum, or if that didn't work, find a way to kill them and then put all the blame on Torquil. But after many attempts, she found that Torquil was too well protected. The stubborn Moody was actually in charge of guarding him personally. Now she couldn't even figure out the situation. Since there was no way to break through Torquil, Yulia had no choice but to send someone to try to contact Anduin. Chapter 175 Yulia, asking for monthly ticket recommendation. If coercion and bribery of Anduin can be effective, that would be the best, and there might be a chance to save Torquil. If that doesn't work, it would be okay to ask Anduin about Torquil's situation indirectly, at least it's better than being in the dark. But the news she got from Anduin changed all her judgments about the situation. This little brat might know more than she thought. Yulia walked into the room. Although she was very anxious to know the answer, she still maintained a very decent aristocratic demeanor, with a charming smile on her face, and her eyes kept looking at the young man who brought her the explosive news. After entering the room, Yulia did not speak easily, but just moved slowly and gracefully to the sofa in front of Anduin and sat down, and then they looked at each other quietly, as if they were waiting for the other to speak first. Although Yulia has been trying her best to maintain elegance and composure since entering, Anduin can still detect a trace of incoordination from her. That kind of nervous and flustered emotion is not so easy to cover up. So Anduin also acted very relaxed. He was really relaxed. Now he was in the initiative, time was on his side. Seeing the young man in front of her sipping the drink, and then looking at her unscrupulously, Yulia finally couldn't help it. Mr. Wilson, I heard that you wanted to see me. Now you got what you wanted, don't you have anything to say to me? Yulia's voice was clear and crisp, and it sounded very comfortable. Anduin gently put down the wine glass, stared at Yulia. First, it's not that I want to see you, but you want to see me. Second, I don't have anything to say to you. On the contrary, I guess you have a lot of things to say. After all, now accept me, there is no one who can solve your troubles. Troublesome guy, Yulia tried to throw the topic to the other party. Facing such a person who can't figure out the depth, the first thing to do was to find out the truth. No matter what Anduin said, she could understand the other party's personality, demands, and bottom line. As a result, the boy was unmoved and threw the topic back. Oh, you're so arrogant. Solve our problems. What is we? I don't know what problems we have now. Can Mr. Wilson help me solve my doubts? I don't know how much this guy knows. Now the more he talks, the more mistakes he makes. Yulia is not a rookie, and she blocked the topic again. Haha, it's really a standard politician's face. She said a lot of things, but in fact, none of them were nonsense. Anduin was too lazy to handle with her. It's very simple. The seat of the whizzing Jamot and the life and death of your Travs family. I don't know if these are considered troubles. Anduin shook the cup in his hand, listening to the sound of ice cubes hitting the wall of the cup, and said slowly. Oh? Yulia raised her eyebrows. Why are your words so profound? Why can't I understand them at all? Then you really should go and check your brain. If you can't understand such simple words, you can always understand the word key. Anduin reminded straight to the point. Key, do you mean the key to the door that can be moved remotely? Or the key to unlock the door? Yulia heard this word again, and she was flustered, but she still pretended to be calm and asked, "You really won't cry until you see the coffin? This is the key." Anduin took out a brass key from his arms, gently held it in his hand, and then said firmly, "The key to the vault." The thing that Yulia feared most happened. After seeing the key, her body couldn't help but lean forward, her pupils shrank sharply, and her right hand was nervously pinching the armrest tightly, and her nails were almost inserted into the leather of the sofa. How could this key be in his hand? Could it be that Tokel was stupid enough to carry this thing with him? Then she quickly put her right hand on her left hip. Her wand was hidden here. Should she just grab it? Thinking of this, she saw Anduin quickly take back the key he showed, and then looked at her with a mocking face. No, the risk is too great. Looking at this guy's posture, I guess he is waiting for me to take action, damn it. Don't be fooled. Even if he gets the key, he may not know what it means. Don't let him lose his composure and let him see the flaw. Ha ha. Yulia quickly adjusted her mood and looked at Anduin with a smile. Oh, it turned out to be this key. How did it end up in your hand? I remember this was my birthday gift to Tokel. It should be the key to an empty vault. You searched it from Tokel, right? Although you defeated him, it's not good to plunder money from others at will. Oh? Anduin showed a puzzled expression, so it was an empty vault? But what I saw in Tokel's memory sealed by the sliding mental protection spell seemed different. And who told you that this was searched from Tokel? By the way, the quality of your Trav's family's safe is a little too good. It took me a while to open it. Smash. After hearing Anduin's words, Yulia could no longer remain calm. She jumped up from her seat as if she had been electrocuted, and then stared at him intently. This guy knows. He knows. He knows the protection spell. He knows about the safe. He must also know about the safe house. Does he also know what is stored in the vault? Yulia didn't know how this guy broke the protective spell, but since he could tell her everything accurately, it was clear. What do you want? Yulia couldn't keep her composure at the beginning. Since this guy knew everything, continuing to test her would only make her look like a clown. Anduin didn't hand over the key, which meant that this guy had something to ask for, which proved that there was something to talk about. I really doubt whether you have a bad memory. Anduin also stood up. He was not used to looking up at others. Didn't I inform you? 100,000 gold galleons. Anduin said word by word, looking down at Yulia with a livid face. That's impossible. Yulia looked at Anduin a little ridiculously and said coldly. 100,000 gold galleons? Do you think our family runs Gringotts? If the Trav's family had so much money, they would have become the Minister of Magic by bribery. Why would they follow that Dark Lord? Anduin naturally knew that the other party could not afford so much money, but since he wanted to bargain, of course he had to first quote an unacceptably high price. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.